still make public comment. During any public comment portions, attendees may use the raise your hand feature and will be called upon and unmuted when it is their turn to speak. If joining by phone, use *9 to raise your hand, *6 to mute and unmute. We also have Spanish interpretation services available in person and via Zoom. On Point Language Solutions is in the back left corner of this room if anyone needs assistance with interpretation services. On Point will now provide information on how to receive interpretation services if you are in need of them. On Point staff provides this information in Spanish for the audience.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, honorable council members, Mr. Chittister, Ms. Bazzano, Ms. Rodriguez, all city staff and members of the public, Victor Hernandez, Spanish interpreter. Buenas noches, les queremos dejar saber a los miembros del público que se les proporcionará interpretación en vivo y en directo de toda esta reunión en español para poder acceder los servicios de interpretación en vivo por Zoom, ya sea con una computadora o una computadora portátil. Usted tendrá que hacer clic en lo que es el icono del globo terráqueo, es decir, un mundo que aparecerá al fondo de su pantalla. Ahora, si usted está utilizando un teléfono inteligente o una tableta, busque lo que es el menú de 3 puntos, seleccione interpretación, luego seleccione el idioma y el español y por último haga clic en done o listo. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Gracias, Victor. Could I please have a roll call?
Councilmember Brownstone.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Nagengast.
Here.
Vice Mayor Penrose.
Here.
Mayor Ruddick.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome and good evening again. Could I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Proclamations and presentations. It looks like we do not have any this evening. Mayor's announcements of community activities and community service. I have one item. I'd like to remind people that tomorrow evening there will be a community workshop on battery backup for power outages. That's going to take place 5:30 to 7:30, March 4th, which is tomorrow evening, at the Senior Co-Siders. PCE, that's Peninsula Clean Energy, wants to hear from you about what sort of solutions might work for you in terms of battery backup, and they want to help you navigate the landscape of backing up your electrical power and helping you do that. So I'm going to be attending tomorrow night. I know Councilmember Johnson will be there. He sits on the Peninsula Clean Energy Board. So we highly recommend that, that you attend. I expect that it's going to be very helpful. And then we're going to have item 5, a report out from recent closed session meetings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This evening, the council met in closed session on 2 items. Councilmember Nagengast did recuse himself on item number 2 on the closed session agenda. There's no reportable action this evening on both items.
Thank you very much. Item 6, city manager updates to council.
Madam Mayor, I don't have any special updates tonight.
Thank you very much. We're moving along to item 7, which is public forum. Just a reminder that you will have 3 minutes to address the council, whether you're in the room or online. You may, if you're in the room, submit a speaker slip, which are over there by the door, and several of you have. Of course, you needn't do that if you're participating by Zoom. So I will begin. And our first speaker is going to be Marjorie Ruiz.
Mayor, Vice Mayor,
council member, senior city staff, Marjorie Ruiz, your local friendly PG&E government affairs rep, here to remind you that I am here. I was thrilled to join you at the beginning of the year in January for a reliability update. PG&E continues to be excited. We continue to stay motivated and committed to all of the reliability work that we discussed in the community center in the beginning of January. Please reach out. I know that I'm in touch with many of you. Some of you I will be scheduling coffees with so that I can get to know you a little bit better. But please reach out. I'm here. I am taking care of this community as best as I can, and I think I've said this already a second time, so I'll say it the third time. I'm here for coffee, lunch, anything that you might need. It's wonderful to be here tonight and to see you. Thanks.
Thank you, Marjorie. You've been very responsive so far to the various pressing issues that we have, especially south of town. Thanks for that. And the next speaker is Willa Chapman.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. Mic up.
You have to get really close, too.
Before I get started, I have a couple of typewritten pages. I'll speak as quickly as possible, but it's my hope you'll let me finish if it goes over slightly the 3 minutes allotted. I'm not here this evening on behalf of Seahorse Ranch. I'm speaking as a 35-year resident of our city and a very concerned member of our community. I encourage you to maintain a rent stabilization ordinance, correct the existing one, or draft a new one. Either this city values its working class residents or it does not. I'm a realist and understand some of you on the council are supported by the real estate industry, and of course, that's perfectly fine. However, special interests must not govern policy. The fear tactics used by landlords threatening to leave this city if rent stabilization was enacted, or should it continue, places obvious pressure on you, the council, both individually and as a panel. But former council member Rohrbach has addressed this issue. The threatened exodus never materialized and was at best de minimis. It is not rent control which forces a landlord to leave Half Moon Bay. It is, frankly, greed. A shrinking profit margin, a shorter vacation. The fear our renters face, however, is substantially more profound. It is the very real fear that they will no longer be able to live in the city where they work or for whom they have worked and are now retired. Even with rent control, rents in our city are a challenge for retired workers, minimum wage workers, even with 2 working adult family members. But you know this. You know our restaurants, markets, shops, stores, bakeries, farms, and ranches are all powered by those residents of our city who will be most negatively impacted by the elimination of rent control. That's the real exodus you should be worried about. The decision to hand over the issue of renters to nonprofits, I believe, not only shirks your responsibility, but in so doing, will expose many of our renters to incredible personal dangers: deportation, detainment, arrest, separation from family. Why? Because the Trump administration has targeted nonprofits. We all know this. Funding has been withdrawn and sources of funding bullied into submission. Nonprofits whose purpose it is to assist marginalized populations, immigrants, people of color, and the poor are the biggest targets of all. Renters under your proposal will need to give all kinds of personal information in their applications to these nonprofits. Why is this a problem? Because we're no longer living in a working democracy. Trump is sending in the FBI to seize records from nonprofits, all sorts of nonprofits who he sees as his enemy. We just saw the FBI raid the superintendent of the LA City schools. who not coincidentally has a Latino surname. He's been critical of Trump.
I need you to get close to wrap up.
You're unwittingly endangering the safety and the lives of our population. I understand there are flaws in the existing ordinance, and I understand the issue that pre-1995 rent control units is a complex one. Most important life quality issues should be complex. Our working class population should be important enough to warrant hard work and time from the city council and staff to solve this problem. Instead, it's not being solved. The city of San Francisco in 2024, while grappling with this same rent control issue and on a much larger scale than ours, acknowledged the inconvenient truth that landlords individually and through their real estate companies for both newer and older residential units inflate rents by using algorithmic devices that artificially set, recommend, and advise
Thank you,
residential
Willa.
levels.
You need to wrap it up. You're 2 minutes over.
I have 2 paragraphs. May I finish?
Fast. Thank
I'm
you.
doing it as quickly as I can. Because of the negative impact these devices had on renters in the city, such algorithmic devices were outlawed, codified as unlawful. I would refer you to the ordinance in San Francisco, section 3710C. I would suggest, regardless of how you ultimately choose to proceed this rent stabilization question, you should determine whether, in fact, these algorithmic devices are being used in our city to inflate rents, and if so, make them unlawful. In conclusion, I understand and appreciate rent stabilization as a complex issue. That said, the abject failure of this city to not just protect our working class, but to instead subject him to potential harm from registering with nonprofits is both unconscionable
Thank you, Willa.
and inexcusable, and is self-serving in the extreme. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Joaquin Jimenez, followed by Rocio Avila.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, city staff, members of the public. My name is Joaquin Jimenez. At the last meeting, when I left, I was very upset with the comments that I heard, from the council when it comes to rent control or communities struggling. One of the things I want to touch, I'm not going to be able to do, it's not going to come out nice. But I saw different quotes, since then. One of them is, when money drives, democracy and humanity take the backseat. When money drives, democracy and humanity take the backseat. I want you to think about that. When you take a look at this picture and see the city of Half Moon Bay with the community members that are struggling, they're marching, asking for housing. Rent control is the closest we could get to keeping our community here in Half Moon Bay. And you're thinking about it, but getting rid of it. I had the opportunity to work with some of you, and other ones follow what you do. And I know who cares about the community. And it is true, what Willa said. we know some of you, work very close with the money people, I'm going to say. People that don't care about a struggling community. As politicians, when you serve a special interest, the faith of our people, the faith of our community is obscure. I want you to think about that too. If you serve in a special interest, where is the faith? Where is your compassion? You are here to serve everybody in the community, not just a special interest. Please think about it. Our community is struggling, and we need that. We need rent control. Thank you.
Next speaker is Rocio Avila.
So Ms. Avila will provide her comment, and then I'll provide you with the site translation afterwards.
Hola, buenas noches, alcaldesa, vicealcaldesa y concejales. Mi nombre es Rocio Ávila y soy líder comunitario aquí en Half Moon Bay. Les insisto a mantener y fortalecer los programas de estabilización de alquiler y registración de alquileres, de estabilización de renta y registro de alquileres. El alquiler promedio en Half Moon Bay es de $4,000 al mes. Esto duplica el promedio en Estados Unidos. Personas como yo, mi familia, mis amigos y compañeros de trabajo, somos quienes hacemos que esta ciudad funcione. Somos trabajadores esenciales, maestros, personas mayores que han trabajado toda su vida en los campos y aún así algunos siguen trabajando para poder vivir y tener un lugar donde dormir. Sin estas protecciones, muchos de nosotros no podemos quedarnos aquí y nos veremos obligados a irnos. Esto alejará a familias como la mía del corazón de Half Moon Bay. Si eliminan estos programas, transmiten el mensaje que Half Moon Bay es solo para quienes pueden pagar y pueden vivir cómodamente. Por favor, rechacen la opción número 3 y opten por protegerme a mí y a todos nuestros vecinos, manteniendo estas protecciones. La estabilidad para los inquilinos es la estabilidad de toda nuestra comunidad. Gracias.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, and all council members. My name is Rocio, and I am a community leader here in Half Moon Bay. I want to insist to keep and fertilize all of the programs for rent control and the rent register. The average rent here in Half Moon Bay is $4,000, and that's twice as much as the average in the United States. People like myself and my family, my friends and peers or coworkers, are the ones that make this city work. We are the essential workers, teachers, older people that have worked all of their lives in the fields, and some continue to work just to be able to live here and have a place to sleep. Without any of these protections, many of us wouldn't be able to remain here, and we would be obliged to leave. This would set us apart from our families, like mine, and be in the heart of Half Moon Bay. If you eliminate these programs, the message that you will be transmitting is that Half Moon Bay is only for those who can afford it to live comfortably. Please say no to option number 3 and choose to protect me and all of my neighbors and maintaining all of these protections. Rent control is for our entire community. Thank you.
Gracias, Rocio. Anne Maury, followed by Paul Gregoriev.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm here to talk about the swimming pool, the new aquatic complex. I've been going to quite a few meetings. The city's Park and Recreation Commission had an excellent meeting the other night. The new superintendent, Dr. Miramani, spoke. He's very dedicated to this new aquatic facility. They've put aside $13 to $14 million. It'll pay for one pool. It probably won't pay for two. And there's many of us, in fact, the majority of people at that meeting, almost everybody, were in favor of two pools. One pool at the high school, the new pool for water polo and competitive swimming, but a second pool, so if the high school PE classes are using one pool, community can use the other. So money's always the object. Ray Mueller, the San Mateo County supervisor, someone heard him say that if the city council endorses the idea of a second pool, he would be proactive in finding some money to help pay for the second pool. And as you all know, the county was a tremendous help in getting us to the library. So I'm here to ask not for your support, because I'm not asking for any money from the city, asking for your endorsement. The second pool would be for the community. The community needs a swimming pool. Everybody should have a chance to take swimming lessons. Swimming's one of the best things for physical and mental health, and it's fun. Where we are now, the swimming lessons are a go. We had to cancel them last year. They're set okay for this year, for this summer. We're trying to get the pool open 4 hours for 6 weeks so people can come and just swim and play and have fun. Families can come and just have an open pool. And it's going to be a little bit of a battle, but we hope we can win the battle. And so it comes down to the city council and the city of Half Moon Bay have to be a little bit proactive in supporting a new aquatic center. And we're not talking about money, we're just talking about endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Next speaker is Paul Gregoriev.
Good evening, council members, and thank you for your attention. I'll try to make it real quick. I was last before you on February 17th talking about the flock license plate reader system we have in Half Moon Bay. Since then, I've been doing more research on the net, and I'm really disturbed about what I'm finding. For example, on February 24th, the City Council of Mountain View voted to terminate its contract with Flock, citing the fact that 250 unapproved agencies had made more than 600,000 searches of its Flock database in the past year. On February 24th this year, Santa Clara County, population 1.9 million folks, announced that it was stopping the use of its Flock systems. Not close enough? How's that? Stopping the use of its Flock systems, and that also affected the Flock systems of Cupertino, 59,000 people, and Los Altos Hills, another 8,000. I found a website, dflock.com, that seemed to do a good job of keeping track of these towns and cities that have canceled their contracts. In October of last year, the California Attorney General filed suit against the city of El Cajon, California, a user of Flock technology, for violating the state law which prohibits sharing Alpra data with out-of-state agencies. meaning that there's little control over the use of those data. In February, the law firm Gibbs Mara filed a class action suit against Flock, claiming, among other things, the illegal collection and sharing of Alper data. So these items seem to indicate that cities large and small are becoming aware that the implementation of Flock Alper technology can be problematic and are therefore dropping the systems. Now, I'm not an attorney, but after reviewing the Flock drafted contract, which the city signed, it seems to me that this contract offers us little or no protection against claims for mishandling of the Flock data, or which involve violation of state law through the system's operation. Thank you very much. I hope we can agendize this item and look and have you guys look carefully at the data I've given you so far. There'll probably be more to come. I think it's also good for the city attorneys to take a close look at this situation. We're in trouble. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. The next speaker is Sid Young.
Sorry I'm late. First of all, Sid Young, I am a public official director at MWSD, but I'm here speaking on my own. So I've now performed the Brown Act requirement. I did want to thank the council members for dropping their lawsuit and not going forward with the appeal on behalf of everyone on the coast side. But I'm not here to talk about that. I just wanted to say thank you. And also, as far as the Flock things go, I would like to wait and see what the data for Half Moon Bay, and maybe they'll tell us the rest of the coastside data too, how effective it's been before making any kind of a judgment. But what I really wanted to say was, I usually listen to the Board of Supervisors reports on Tuesday, but last Tuesday I missed it, and so I only watched the video, and the Harbor District was having a special meeting for the Pelagic Restaurant Group, and they were talking about maybe getting rid of them for the lease and everything. So I think they did delay it because of something that came up during the video, which I suggest everybody watch. But meanwhile, the Pelagic Restaurant Group has hired a new executive chef, and I think we should all go down and try to support that restaurant. The owner, David Westendorf, has stage 4 cancer, and it's been a struggle to keep the restaurant going under that condition. So that was part of the meeting, was that he aired his issues with the Harbor District, but I couldn't quite get everything, but it seemed like they haven't been all that sympathetic. So I would just like to say on behalf of the harbor and the people that live near the harbor like I do, I don't want to see a restaurant go under and have an empty storefront down there when salmon season's about to open and when we have the summer with all the visitors coming. So I went down when they had their special event for the new chef, and I think it's a good restaurant to try to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid. I see that we have one speaker online, Chrislyn.
Hello, Council. Thank you so much. I just wanted to send out an open invitation to the community, and we will be formalizing on social media and all the different communication styles, but we will be having our grand opening in our new space with Visit California, and on April 2nd from 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. And we'll have it in our office, and we'll be working with the city to hopefully have some music and all that good stuff. So if everybody could mark their calendars, if you would like to come celebrate with us on April 2nd from 4 to 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online who would like to address the council under public forum? You can raise your hand now. I see no other hands raised, so we can move on to the consent calendar.
Madam Mayor, if I would, staff received some additional information today on item 8D, and we're waiting for some confirmations, so I would recommend that we actually continue that to a future meeting and not take it up tonight.
So you're going to pull 8D, which is authorization to transfer remaining Stone Pine Cove grant funds to San Mateo County. That's
Correct.
the item?
Yes, please.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to read the consent items and then ask if there's anyone who would like to comment on consent. The items include item 8A, waive reading of resolutions and ordinances. Item 8B, Treasurer's Report for the quarter ending December 31st, 2025. Item 8C, Financial Report for the quarter ended on December 31st, 2025. Item 8E, Approved minutes of the February 17th, 2026 special meeting. And item 8F, Approved minutes of the February 17th, 2026 regular meeting. If there's anyone who would like to address any of those items, you can come to the podium now or raise your hand online. Okay, seeing none, I'll ask if the council members wish to pull any additional items. Seeing none, could we have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar minus item 8D?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We're moving on to item 9, ordinances and public hearings. There are none this evening. Item 10, resolutions and staff reports. And item 10E is a mid-year operating budget review and adoption of resolution to amend the fiscal year 2025-26 budget. We will have a staff report on that.
Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor, Council, members of the public. Tonight, I will be presenting the mid-year review for our fiscal year 25-26 budget. As Council knows, our fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th, so we're a little bit past the midway point, which was this past December. I also do regular reports on our financials on a quarterly basis, but since those two items coincided this year, the quarter report was a part of the agenda on consent that Council just approved, but I will quickly go over the results as I would normally have done. So starting with the revenues, we have our major revenues with a comparison to the prior budget based on percentage. TOT or hotel tax, we had budgeted 8.6 million. We've received about 4, which is about 47% of the budget. Compared to last time during this time, it was about 36. On upcoming slides, I have final estimates for our revenues, but generally we're performing better than anticipated in this line item. The last few months have been positive for us in this category. Property taxes, we had a budget of 3.7. We received about 2.4. This category can be a bit odd. Base property taxes are performing as expected, but there's a portion of property tax called vehicle in lieu fees that have been temperamental these past few years, which is kind of skewing the numbers. But again, I'll go more into that in the upcoming slides. Sales and use taxes, we budgeted about 4.9. We've received about 1.8. That does include Measure R, the sales tax increase that went into effect last April. This category is a little bit a hard comparison because things have changed, but we've been trending as we had hoped generally. Other revenues, this includes development fees or miscellaneous fees or grants. We budgeted about 6.4. We've received about 2. And where some of these items have gone up, some of these items are coming down, but we'll get more into it in later slides. Overall, we received about 10.6 million in revenues. So here's a slide on TOT. This chart is our revenues by month for the past 6 months. The darker teal columns are for this year. The gray columns are from last year. And as you can see, month over month, we've been performing better than the year prior. In previous years, we were in this pattern of sliding revenues, but it looks like we're potentially moving in the right direction, especially in those, you can see in those summer months. We're a little bit closer in November and December, but those summer months, we saw some growth there. On to sales and use tax. This is a new chart for council because of Measure R and is new for us. The first lighter gray column, this looks a little dotted. That is what we received last year. That darker gray column is what we budgeted for, and that teal column is what we've received so far. So you can see the effect that Measure R has had in our financials, much more than what we received last year. And the good thing is that we're trending appropriately with our budget. With Measure R, it was a little bit of a more difficult forecast to do because we never had it before. So it was kind of, it was more of a guesstimate than having something more of a basis, but it looks like it's trending appropriately. On the expenditure side, we're looking good. Expenditures are a bit more regular, a bit more timely, so we just look to make sure we're underneath 50% budget. We're at 21%, which could be a little bit low. That's mostly due to public safety. But if you were to look at the other departments, that looks like the average is about 35% for all the departments. So overall, we're trending lower than anticipated, and a lot of that is most likely salary savings. So going into the mid-year review, so the mid-year review is a best practice process for municipalities. It gives us time to look at our revenues, see how we're doing, any adjustments that we might have to make, and then it also gives us a chance to look at our expenditures. For us, this starts in January. We start to review and estimate it out. What gets considered into how we forecast is essentially what have we done in the past, our actuals thus far, and do we want to incorporate any growth that we've seen. For most line items, we just take what we've already received and then assume that we're going to receive the same as we did year prior. This is a conservative estimate, but it's worked well for us in the past. On the expenditure side, we meet with departments and we review their budget, we go over what they may or may not need, and we take direction. The only direction this year was to wait until, we only want to do anything that was necessary, the things that we couldn't wait until July. We compile all the numbers, that gets turned into this packet that's in front of you tonight. It's a month-long process, but it's an important one as these numbers directly lead into our priority setting session on March 14th in the next week, which that process leads into our budget for next fiscal year. So that's the framework of the process, but getting into the numbers, this table highlights what we budgeted for, what the latest estimate is, and the difference between the two. With transient occupancy tax, this is our biggest one that we review and revise the most and constantly looking at it month to month. We forecast TOT out on a monthly basis. For the months that we have ahead of us that we don't know yet, we take what we did last year for the exact same month. Using that methodology, our estimate for this year, we think we're going to end the year around 9.9 million, or about a $1.2 million increase. Council may remember that we had some great gains on the back end half of last fiscal year. Those gains kind of occurred before we actually built this year's budget. So this adjustment here is more of a reflection of our budgets catching up to what we've been experiencing. But I believe this to be a fairly conservative number as well. Last year we ended about 9.6. So this year going to 9.9 is in the same realm. For property taxes, we are estimating 4.3 million. As I mentioned before, this category is a bit odd. Base property taxes are fine. It's a portion of property taxes called vehicle in lieu fees. It's what people pay when they register their car, essentially, every year with their license registration. There is some contention around these fees between the cities in San Mateo County and the states. The state paid us late for last year's allocation. That showed up this year, which is kind of driving the numbers upwards here. That timing difference is what's increasing how we think we're going to end the year, that 600K increase. But that doesn't really mean it's ongoing permanent growth in this category. Base is fine, but VLF, vehicle in lieu, is a little bit of a pending topic. And finally, sales tax. We're pretty much in line of expectations, but there is a small adjustment upwards of about 75K between the both of them, base sales tax and then Measure R. So overall, for major revenues, upward adjustment of about 1.9, with a significant chunk of that, the majority of it coming from TOT. We did see some net losses in kind of our minor revenues, about 400K. A chunk of that is business license renewals, and then the other piece of that is kind of development-related revenues, so building permits, engineering fees, fee reimbursements of planning time. But with that, the net revenue adjustment is about an increase of about $1.5 million. So as you can imagine, going into this mid-year, as I mentioned, the departments were advised no increases unless it was urgent, necessary, and can't wait. As such, there's no expenditure adjustments for neither general fund or capital projects. The only thing for council consideration on the expenditure side is a little bit of accounting cleanup that's in the packet, closing out the bond fund. The city used to have a bond several years back through a judgment that has since been closed or since been completed, and we want to shift the monies back to the general fund, but it's about 7K. So mostly accounting. So accounting cleanup is what's in the staff report. But overall, as far as true expenditures, there's no true expenditure ask of council. If council were to approve the following adjustments, here's our fund balances will look on June 30th, 2026. The first column is the adopted budget, which we had unassigned balances about $3.5 million. And the second column is the proposed revised budget. Because we had quite a bit of unassigned balances, we are also recommending to fully fund our reserves. The city has a reserve policy of about 50% of operating expenditures, and 50% is because we're a town that relies on transient occupancy tax, and it's more of a volatile revenue source, so our reserves are about 50% to reflect that. At the beginning of our deficit management era in our financials that started back in 2024, we relied on a portion of our reserves to get us through. But now that we've had some gains and TOT's looking like it's heading in the right direction, it seems like the right time to put them back. So that is for council recommendation. If approved, we are estimating about 12 million in reserves, 12.1 million in reserves, and even after reserves are fully funded, that'll leave about 1.6 million in unassigned. And the decrease in unassigned funds from adopted to revised is putting some of that money back into reserves. So forecasting and the deficit. So as part of the mid-year process, we develop a very draft version of the 5-year forecast. Now, forecasting is it's not a set in stone plan, but it is a best practice tool to identify any issues that are ahead of us. Back in 2024, as we were doing this process, we identified a deficit that was TOT was coming down while our existing expenditures were going up, and that was our signal to start looking at the budget and what can we do and what can we adjust. Some of the things that we did during that time period, of course, looking at our budget line by line on the expenditure side, delaying or deferring certain things, operating and capital. We also did a cost allocation and fee study, which was making sure the fees that we charge at least cover the cost of providing that service. We did a revenue enhancement study, working with the finance committee. Where has the city been leaving money on the table somewhere? Can we up our revenues? And then, of course, we went to the voters in November 2024 for a sales tax increase. So the culmination of all that is kind of highlighted and illustrated in this chart, and that's back in June of 2024, the forecast for the upcoming budget was estimated 4.5, but these past few years, going through the process and taking at it bit by bit, right now it's looking in the 1.8 million amount for next year. Again, it's a forecast, and that number will change, of course, but it speaks to the magnitude of what we're looking at as we frame next year's budget. It's cautiously optimistic, but it's going in the right direction. So as I said, going into next year, a deficit highly likely, but not as bad as it could have been. Over the next few weeks, staff is going to tighten the forecast and really look at it again and again and again. And it's a recurring thing that culminates to the budget. And then in the next portion of the budget process for next year is the priority setting, which is March 14th. And that's a chance for council to come together, set priorities for the city, as well as give us some guidance into the budget. With that, the recommendation is as follows: adopt the attached resolution to amend the fiscal year 25-26 operating and capital budget. And I welcome any questions council may have.
Madam Mayor, if I may, Ken, can you go back to the slide that shows the fund balance projections? General fund summary, correct. I just want to highlight this slide. I think it really illustrates the progress we've made, and I think it's something we need to celebrate and be proud of. There's a lot of work remaining to be done, but you know, the way that we've made our way through the last several years with deficits and concerns about our finances was utilizing our economic uncertainty reserves, which were created by the council before the pandemic when we were in really good financial shape. And the foresight there was really incredible to say we need to set aside more reserves than best practices tell us, because we need to be able to navigate through challenging times and do it in a way that hopefully reduces impacts on the community and the services we provide. And that's exactly what we've done the last several years. And what is so exciting is that our recommendation tonight is to take all this progress we've made and replenish those reserves and bring us back to a 50% reserve level. Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, but best practice for general fund reserves is
16%.
16%. That is what the best practice says a city should have. As a smaller city, we're a little more volatile, I would say, because we're dealing with lower amounts of money. And so I think it's prudent that we have a 30% general fund reserve policy for operating reserves. That is 30% of our annual budget gets set aside for total disaster. You know, there's something happens where our revenues stop coming in and we just have to be able to float ourselves through a few months. And then when you add into that another 20% for economic uncertainty at 50%, we're at more than triple the recommended amount of reserves. And that's where we're at today. We're back to that level, plus another 1.6 million in unallocated reserves. And I think that's something to be really, really proud of as a council, as a staff, as a community, because we still provide high quality services and we're doing great things in the community. It's also important for us to be cautious. Often this is the time of year where you look at that unassigned fund balance and you think about what else could we be spending some of those funds on, some one-time projects. I'd be cautious about thinking about spending much of that because that may help us in the next fiscal year continue to keep our budget balanced as we hone in on our revenues and expenditures and try to get back to a structurally balanced budget and not have to touch reserves again. So it's something we can talk about and we should be thinking about. Do we want to use some of that unallocated fund balance towards programs or projects that are important to the city, but balance that against the fact that we're still looking at a future deficit and we want to be very prudent about spending that money where it could be helpful in future years. So I just want to thank Ken. I think he's done an incredible job the last several years and this year helping us navigate this. Obviously, council policies and priorities have done a great job. And then I just want to recognize our staff who have been operating lean and mean for a long time. And I think the results are really something to be proud of. So thank you.
Thank you. Clarifying questions from council members. Who would like to go first? Councilmember Nagengast?
Thank you, Ken. Great to know that we were going to replenish our reserves. I think that's remarkable to be able to do that. And, you know, I think, you know, if we think about this 1.6 unassigned, you know, I know there's golf fees and a couple other things that we don't know where those are yet. So we just, you know, I think city manager was being very prudent to say, hey, you may want to hang on to that just to see where we go with this. So.
And I'll point out, and Ken, please confirm, when we talk about our forecasted deficit next year, that accounts for the funding that we already know that we're likely to lose. So it already is a very conservative estimate and thinking about some of the challenges that are ahead of us.
Good. Thank you.
Would that include not just golf fees, but potential loss of the VLF, which is $700,000?
Yes, it includes a shortfall amount. The shortfall amount always changes year to year, but it does include it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Anybody else with questions? I have one speaker. Do you want to address the budget item? Sid Young?
Yes, I just had the question you asked, but I do follow the county, and their estimate is, they do have a lawsuit against the state, and it's up to 119 million right now. Because last year it was 38 million, and now this year they're withholding more. So I know you only get a portion of it, but maybe if you don't include it in your budget, then it'll be gravy when you get it if they win their lawsuit. And that's what I was just hoping, that you weren't banking on getting it. Thank you.
Sounds like we're not. Yes, okay. Is there anyone online who would like to address the budget, mid-year budget item? Seeing no hands raised, I'll bring it back to the council for any further comment or a motion. Councilmember Brownstone.
Just one comment, and I'd like to remind folks of that when they're talking about having a council that watches a budget. And, back in 2021, we had, a $5 to $6 million loss of revenue. Mostly from hotel tax, and a few other things. That's money that just disappears. It just doesn't sort of come back. It wasn't like things got better slowly, and we slowly got more revenue back. It's quite an accomplishment 5 years later to be where we are. That money, 5 to 6 million, just disappeared. Then we had the extra 1.5 to 2 million of additional fees from the sheriffs. All these things kept happening. And so it's great. I think the city stuck together, the council stuck together. And even now, we had a 4.5 million deficit in just June 24th, in less than 2 years. Less than 2 years. 1 year and 4 months to 8 months to be exact. It's now down to 1.8 million. So we're really making a lot of great progress. We tighten our belts, we're still delivering services, and you never know what's around the corner, but we also have some great reserves. So I just wanted to make that contextual comment.
Yes, our trustee role, when we're city council members, is probably the most important function that we have. Trustee over our lands, over our budget, over our facilities. It's a very important part of the job, if not the most important part of the job. And I will say, I think staff has stepped up. You've acknowledged the situation that we're in and come up with creative solutions. And you're not rosy-eyed about the future either. You're being very sensible about that. So we all appreciate that work that staff is doing. Thank you. Is there a motion? The motion is to adopt a resolution amending the fiscal year 2025-26 operating and capital budget, amending it per the recommendations of staff.
Second.
I'm going to ask for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Brownstone,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Nagengast,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Penrose,
Yes.
Mayor Reddick.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay. So the next item is item 10B, Community Services Financial Assistance Program Mid-Year Update. I know.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Julissa Acosta, Community Services Analyst. Good evening, Council, members of the community. I am here to present to you tonight an update on the Community Services Financial Assistance Program. This is a typical procedure for us. We come back to you mid-year to let you know how the organizations are doing, if they're facing any challenges, what are the highlights. All of that is included in the staff report, but happy to go over more detail with all of you tonight. Just a little bit more background. I know some of our new council members are still getting acquainted with the process and what we've done in the past. This program started with a $100,000 contribution, no formal structure, no subcommittee, and grants were in different amounts to different organizations serving different purposes. Throughout the years, and as we saw the need in our community, we started to drive it with a little bit more focus. Council directed staff to create a subcommittee that reviews each of the applications and determines the program direction. Over time, Council also decided to allocate additional funding. It grew up to $300,000. The focus, especially during the pandemic and to help with recovery efforts, was to provide funding to organizations that secure safety net services for the community. And that was encompassed in childcare access, senior care, homelessness services, mental health services, dental, youth services. And we've been working with the same group of nonprofits. At the same time, throughout the COSA Recovery Initiative, Council directed staff to implement a cohort model that was based on our recommendation from the COSA Recovery Initiative. This was to help alleviate some of the administrative burdens that come with managing grants for organizations, but also to create the opportunity to collaborate a little bit more among the organizations that were funded by the city. Last year, Council also instructed staff to implement a 2-year funding model. Again, this is more to remove the burdens of the admin and reviewing all the grants every year, and create the collaborative approach. This will be the second year of that funding cycle, and I'll go over more of the details. These are the organizations, what you see on your screen, that were funded for this current year. Last year, when we presented to Council on this item, city staff came with 3 different options. One was to continue the funding at the $300,000 level, which is what we had been doing. But like you heard from earlier, our budget situation last year was slightly different. And staff also presented 2 different options: to fund at $250,000 and to fund at $200,000. Council landed somewhere in the middle, deciding to fund 2 organizations at the previous funding amount, which was the full amount, and that was Abundant Grace and COSI Hope. And then the rest of the organizations received a percentage of the original funding amount. So what you see in your screen is what we funded for the current fiscal year. I want to highlight a couple of successes from the program. Over time, we've seen more collaboration among the nonprofits. There's more coordination among themselves, especially when it comes to emergency response. We've also helped them create a shared identity and develop their own organization's identity. This is through the technical assistance. With that technical assistance during 2022-2023, Coast Pride was able to apply for funding through the state for mental health services for the youth, and create the Alcove program that is underway now. And so that was a big success. Coast Pride, not the organization, but they're the fiscal agent for Alcove model, received $1.7 million to implement the model, and it's a work in progress. We've also tried to strengthen capacity from our nonprofit leadership and just continue that collaboration and community approach throughout. This is the time where you received the update. This is what we've seen so far. I want to highlight a couple of the challenges we faced. Some of it is, or most of it is included in the staff report, but I want to highlight that some organizations faced challenges with the federal funding cuts last year, and the SNAP benefits pause during the government shutdown. That caused big stress for a lot of our nonprofit providers, and that was one of the biggest challenges highlighted during the mid-year reports. On the plus side, we've seen clients accessing services, children receiving meals and support, seniors receiving transportation services, mental health and substance abuse have also been addressed throughout the different programs that we have. And continued collaboration with the nonprofits have prevented folks from going into homelessness and have supported those who are transitioning out of homelessness. So at this point, this is where my update ends. But I have an additional task for you, is to help us understand the direction of the program for next year, and also determine if, based on the mid-year budget review that you just heard, if we want to fund the organizations that were partially funded during the fiscal year. So I'm happy to take any questions. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I was very excited about the cohort program. I'm wondering if you can give us an example or a couple of examples of how that cohort organization has come to fruition, how it's produced results.
Sure. I think one of the biggest highlights was, like I mentioned, the collaboration with Coast Pride when they received the funding for the ALCOV model. All of the organizations were immediately reached out to for letters of support and programming designed. That was the first sort of win that we took from the cohort. Additionally, when the shooting happened and the floods happened, personally, I can say it made our job a lot easier when reaching out for additional services. It was easy for us because we had direct connection to the executive leadership to manage additional services for the community that was struggling at the time, whether it was housing, whether it was additional food, whether it was clothing, transportation services. That made it easy for us. Organizations on their own immediately jumped to that. The other, I think, big success is collaboration, and organizations are without the city leading the charge, are partnering with each other, developing programming. And I think that was one of the recommendations that came from the Coastside Recovery Initiative. When the task force was doing their evaluation process, they realized that nonprofits weren't necessarily talking to each other as much, and now they are. They have a direct line to leadership and different staffing levels, and we've given that opportunity. And the other thing is when we convene the group, which is about quarterly right now, we also try to share best practices and bring tools to the tables that will support and enhance their services.
Thank you.
Sure.
How often does the cohort meet?
We try to meet quarterly, though depending on capacity, sometimes like, for example, when the shooting happened and the floods, that was a big chunk for city staff to be able to manage both things, and so we put a pause on that, but we quickly came back, and so we try to meet quarterly with nonprofit leadership.
Thank you. Other council members with questions?
I have a question. So we have this group of 9, I call them, and it seemed to me it was a result of the COVID-19. These were the nonprofits that, is it fair to say, the biggest bang for your buck, so to speak? I mean, for the types of needs that were necessary during the pandemic, and then we just talked about the shooting, have things changed now somewhat? Is it still this group of 9? Maybe that leads into what, next budget year, but does it stay this group of 9, or are we seeing things, okay, things seems to be shifting where a different nonprofit might be more?
We're happy to take your guidance on this. I will say, just from reading the reports directly from the nonprofits, it might not be COVID, though we're still recovering from it. There have been additional threats. Immigration was a big challenge for several of the nonprofits last year, and it has been. The federal funding cuts continue to be, and so that adds stressors to the community members who seek services from this group of nonprofits.
I think what I'm hearing, it probably still applicable,
Most likely, yes.
That 9, and then maybe that's jumping still a little ahead for the next budget year.
Right.
But I kind of curious, and then I think one of the groups does emergency rental program.
Yeah, Coastside Hope.
Coastside Hope. Would they provide, I don't know, I didn't see any numbers in the report on that.
Yeah, I have the detailed version of that. I believe for rental assistance so far for mid-year through December 31st, it was about $5,000 that they provided in rental assistance. And I followed up with Judith, the executive director, and she mentioned that that only provided assistance to 3 households. Because of 3 households. Because of the pricing, the rental prices.
Yeah,
in
so
the community.
it's like it's a stopgap type thing, right?
Yes, it's only a one-time thing. It's not ongoing. It's not a recurrent type of aid. It's like if you're struggling, for example, you lost your job or you have a medical condition that prevented you from working, you can seek help, and it's a one-time allocation.
All right, thank you.
If I could also add to that, part of it is, it's not that only 3 families needed or households needed that support. Coastside Hope has other sources of funding specifically for housing assistance, and each one has kind of nuanced requirements and criteria. And so they look at each request and kind of work their way down the criteria to get them to qualify with the highest, restrictions. And then if they can't qualify there, they move to the next funding source. And ours, being just a general assistance program, has the most open criteria right now. And so it's kind of like they can't qualify for any of the other ones, so that's when they use our funding. So there are other people getting rental assistance through other programs at Coastside Hope.
Do we have any idea of the number of people that are requesting assistance?
I can get that. Sorry, fly. I can definitely get that for you and bring it back. Yeah. I don't have the number off the top of my head because I don't know how many folks have sought assistance from Coastside Hope, but I'm sure it's a lot higher than 3.
We'll have that data when we bring back the rent stabilization item, which should be at our next meeting, the 17th.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions before taking public comment? Seeing none, we have a speaker, Spandan Chakrabarty.
Hi, everyone. Mayor Ruddick, council members, Lisa, thank you for letting me be here. My name is Spandan Chakrabarty, and I'm here to represent Sunrises Dental Health, which is one of the grantees, as their development director. Last time I was here, at a meeting like this, there were some questions about what is a safety net service, and I gave it some thought. And I'm going to present a couple of things for you. Dental health, or dental pain, dental disease, is the most impactful thing that impacts economic freedoms, educational achievements for underserved communities across the age range. What am I talking about? California children miss 784,000 school days every year because of dental pain. And who are these kids mostly? Mostly the people without resources to get it addressed. What does that lead to? That leads to falling behind in school. That leads to folks then getting stuck at jobs that don't pay that well and missing work. 1 in 4 of all work absences in America, dental pain. And then let's get to the later in life. 1 in 5 seniors 65 plus missing all their teeth. That's what I can say. I think that's having access to dental services early on in your life is a question of safety net. And this program, and I think I can speak for some of my colleagues who are here, we don't just provide services, right? We build community. We get our neighbors through tough times. And we work with one another. So, and right now, people aren't getting any breaks in their daily lives, especially people who are not well-resourced. We are seeing people come into our offices holding letters saying, I'm going to lose my dental benefits, medical, dental, what do I do? So I'm here to say, I would love for you to restore this fund, and I think we will never give up on this community. And please don't give up on us. Thank you.
Rocio Avila.
Sorry, I don't think I can.
Ya. Solamente quiero compartir una historia de un familiar mío
So
que
I just
pasó
want to
hace
share
poco
a story of a family member of mine
sobre en busca de asistencia para pagar renta.
looking for this rental assistance.
Esta persona porque estaba preocupado por pagar la renta y que no esperara el papel del dueño que tuviera que salir.
They were concerned about paying the rent and not have to wait for that piece of paper that the owner, provided them to leave the premises.
Pero creo que hay un requisito que es muy fuerte y fue en Hops I Hope, sorry, pero lo voy a decir.
I'm sorry to say this, but I think there's a requirement that's kind of harsh there at Coastside Hope.
Que solamente podían ayudarlo si si ya estaba desalojado o tenía el papel de la persona, del dueño, para que él pudiera
That they could only help if they had that piece of paper in hand saying that they needed to leave the premises.
Él lo que no quería era que llegara a ese punto de que tuviera esa presión.
So he didn't want to let it get to that point.
Por eso fue a buscar la ayuda financiera.
And so that's why he went to go seek financial aid or assistance.
Yo sé que hay veces que se tienen que poner cláusulas o
I know that sometimes there needs to be like these clauses or these other things.
pero cuando pasan estas situaciones creo que si ellos tienen algo, un comprobante, tienen que hacerle un poquito menos difícil a veces la vida.
But I think that in certain situations, like if they have some kind of proof, I think that we can make their lives less miserable.
Porque cuando estás pasando una situación de una enfermedad y todavía aparte que tienes que pagar renta, que no tienes para...
Because when people are going through an illness and then on top of that, they're saying, you also have to pay your rent and you got to do this, you got to do that.
No solamente entra en ansiedad el papá, sino también los hijos.
It's not just the parents that feel the anxiety, but also the children.
Ese es mi comentario.
So that's my comment.
Thank you, Rocio. Is there anyone online who would like to address this item? You can raise your hand now. I don't see anyone, so I'll bring it back to the council. I think, to organize the discussion, we should start with what does the council want to do about yes or no, provide funding, the balance of the shortfall that some of the groups received in the appropriation last year. Let's start there before talking about the future program. Councilmember Johnson, I'll start with you.
Coastside Hope was at 43%, and Sunrise was at 43%, and everybody else is at 50 and 100. I feel comfortable with what we're doing here, but I'd like to see the numbers, higher so that we can get them back up, is what I would like to see. Because I know we went through this last year, and we were trying to hit this budget target that we were trying to meet. And I think a loss and abundant grace were the ones that we kicked up a little bit higher.
Oh, that was Coastside Hope and
Or
Abundant
Coastside,
Grace
that's
got
right.
their
Yes.
full ask.
Right. So yeah, I'm in agreement with this, but I'd like to see those two kind of get back up.
Which two?
Coastside Hope and the Sunrise Dental, because they're,
Well, Coastside Hope was at their full
oh, they are, okay.
request.
Okay.
Coastside Hope and Abundant Grace were 100% of their ask,
Okay.
and the others got a percentage. Maybe you could review, yeah, yes.
To bring everyone up to their previous funding? Everyone or just those?
Well, not the two that already
Not the two
had,
that were already
yes, the
received,
other
but the
ones.
remaining, the
Right.
ones that got partial funding, they can
Right.
receive their previous allocated allocations.
Yes.
Okay. With that.
Yeah, do we have,
I don't
the
have a
delta?
figure. I didn't do the calculation, but it would be, let me go back to one slide. So,
yeah.
yeah.
300 minus 226.
And so this has the technical assistance. So just as a reminder for council, we usually keep about 10% for the technical assistance. We had allocated to $20,000 for, sorry, no, $20,000 for technical assistance for the current fiscal year. Last year, when we came and presented the closure on the Opportunity Center of the Coast Side, council directed staff to move $10,000 from the technical assistance to continue covering the portion of utilities until the lease ended. So that's why there's a shortage. So it would be a total of approximately $286,000 altogether.
So the delta between, if you take out that $10,000 for technical assistance, the delta between what was funded this year and fully funding the remaining nonprofits is $63,000. That's what it would take to go back to full funding.
Yeah, okay. Right. And then there's one issue with that, I just wanted to point out, and that is, we won't, at least under the current process, get a report on how those funds are being used. You know, when we allocate the money in previous years, everybody gets, you know, their request, and then, well, no, maybe I'm wrong about that.
They'll do
Yeah,
an
right.
end-of-year report.
The end-of-year report, that's correct.
That is provided to us in June.
Yeah.
Okay, that answers that question.
July, but yes.
Right. So, Councilmember Johnson, are you good with that amount?
Yes, I am. But when you're saying the report, you're saying the report that we're actually seeing here as they talk about every person and what they do. Is that the correct?
Well, that's their mid-year report.
Mid-year report,
But
okay.
apparently there's an end-of-the-year report.
Correct.
They reminded me about that, so,
Okay.
yeah. Councilmember Nagengast.
I think 63,000 is a good number to try, because we originally had committed, well, didn't commit. We suggested 300,000, and I thought that was a good discussion to try and find something come back later because of our budgeting, and that's part of, you know, what we do. So I'm comfortable with 63. Right, we're saying it's 63,000.
Yeah, well, 63,000, what that would do is, it wouldn't affect the funding for Abundant Grace or Coastside Hope because they receive the full budget allocation at the beginning of the year. It would restore the remaining nonprofits to the previous amounts that have been budgeted in past years through the end of the fiscal year. And then, of course, the next policy question is start to talk about next year.
Councilmember Brownstone.
I agree with my other two council members. That sounds like a good number to bring everyone back.
Vice Mayor.
If it were up to me, I'd double the number.
Okay, I'm good with the 63,000 too. So I think you have sufficient direction on that.
Okay, so what we do, this is just direction. We'll bring a resolution back at our next meeting. We'll just put it on consent to confirm this. Correct, we need official action.
Correct.
Yeah, so we'll bring a resolution back on consent on March 17th. In the meantime, we'll start working on the amendments to the agreements with the remaining organizations.
Councilmember Johnson?
So I remember when Mayor Brownstone and I were on that committee, and we talked about this, and I remember when we had this long discussion, and we were trying to do this midpoint thing, see where we are, see where we're gauging, because we're hurting. We were doing pretty bad last year, and you know this whole discussion. And that's what made us do this midpoint thing, and to see where we're at, and to hear where we're at on the financials. And that's why, Ken, thank you so much for that report, because this is the gauge that we needed to say, yes, we can up the ante on this. And so now this mechanism's working. I like how it's working, and then we check in again, and we check in again. And if we can, we can. If we can't, we can. Last year was tough. And that's what I was bringing up as Mayor Ruddick was bringing up is Abundance Grace, and the other one that you said full funding right away because they're doing a certain thing that you felt was pretty important, which I agree with, but at the time we were trying to cut back. But so the ones that we have full funded, I think is great, but I also think is best that we can do what we can when we have the money in the bank. And right now, I think we did a really good job here, and I think this should continue no matter what, and the highs and the lows. But if we can do better, we'll do better, as Vice Mayor says, but right now we have to kind of stick to what we can. Thank you.
That wasn't what I said. I didn't say if we can do better, we'd do better. I said I would double the amount. I think we are making cuts that are egregious, and we're cutting funding and considering cutting funding to the people that it hurts the most.
So let's move on. Envisioning the future of this program for fiscal year 26-27.
And as a reminder, we do have a subcommittee of the council that staff works with, but it'd be great to have some direction tonight on some of the things we want to consider in next year's program so that we can sit down with the subcommittee and start working out some of the details to bring back to you for approval later.
Go ahead.
Just one last comment. I would recommend to council members who haven't had a chance before the next cycle, go to some of those programs as a council member, and give yourself an hour or more to really ask them all like details of what they do and how it gets done, because it's really quite remarkable how much service they do provide, and all those services have a huge effect on, we've already heard, mental health, good teeth, less homelessness, less domestic violence. But when you actually hear it from the folks who are doing that work, it's very informative, and you'll have a much clearer idea of if you feel the money is being well spent and how it's being spent. So if you haven't had a chance, I recommend it.
And there are other organizations too that, I do volunteer. So, but I wanted to, my main thing was this group of 9. Is that something, it sounds like that's something probably still more practical. This group of 9 to keep it there. I don't know. Because of the cuts. Yeah, right. So, I mean, I'm okay with, again, this year, or I guess for next year. Would that be another 2-year cycle? Is that what you're thinking?
That's what we've recommended last year. Again, this is to remove the burdens on both nonprofit and city staff. More than anything, we want to increase the collaboration and to allow the nonprofits to see each other as partners and not competitors when trying to secure funding.
And when that 2-year recommendation doesn't, we understand, you understand, the nonprofits understand, it doesn't guarantee the funding, but it does start to, focus those efforts as we're making decisions going forward, so that we're not, if we wanted to open it up more broadly, that obviously takes more work, more effort, more energy. And so if you were to decide to continue with the 9 that are focused on safety net services and commit to a 2-year approach to it, then what we're really just talking about is funding amounts each year. So it simplifies the process for everybody, but that's just a recommendation.
So I'm hearing you're saying that you'd rather just skip the whole subcommittee business this year and just give direction?
Because I still think you need to go through the subcommittee.
Why?
Well, for funding, right? Isn't that where we decide how much money?
Well, I thought you were saying you just wanted to repeat.
Well, I meant the 2-year cycle, the cycle, the 2-year cycle. We don't know our budget yet, right? So I don't know if we can make a decision tonight how much money should be in there at this time. I was looking at just the setup of the 9 nonprofits and how the reason we did a 2-year cycle is the way I understand it, is less burdensome on staff and the nonprofits, but they still have to give us reports, right? And I like the idea of this mid-year
They do,
reporting.
and just to add on to that, we've always had that practice. We receive a mid-year report and an end-of-year report.
So the purpose of our meeting would be what?
Money?
If I would, I think what I'm hearing is the subcommittee would still take the applications from them, because every year that we do this, at the beginning of the 2-year cycle, all of those 9 nonprofits still submit applications. Here's where the needs are, here's how we would serve them, here's how much money we're requesting. And the subcommittee could decide, one, a recommendation to the full council of how much the overall program should, be budgeted at, and how that should be broken down.
Okay.
Is that fair, Councilmember Nagengas? Yeah.
Okay. Now, I do want to raise this issue, and I'm happy to discuss it, but, a portion of our property tax goes to the county for mental health services. So the question is, do we want to fund local mental health services when our property taxes already go to the county for this purpose? The county is the social safety net provider for, mental health and narcotics and things like that. Maybe one strategy for us is to determine what the local need is here, to hear from providers, and for the city to represent our needs for mental health support to the county and make sure that the services that we need here in Half Moon Bay are being represented in the county budget, for mental health and addiction services and all those kinds of things are being met. I think maybe it would be beneficial for us to take more of an active role rather than us providing those services when it's not really a function of the city, that we become, the advocate for those programs at the county level and have the county fully fund what's needed here. So I wanted to raise that issue. I've had it raised to me, like, hey, I thought, 10% of my property tax already goes to mental health support. What are we doing here? And I understand there may be need that's, falls through the cracks because the county has its own restraints this year around VLF and other things too, and they're worried about Measure K being oversubscribed and stuff like that. But we might have a discussion about how can we make sure the county is funding what we want and what we need in our community as far as those services are concerned.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to my county budgeting days, and I'm not sure where that 10% figure comes from. So that might be part of the discussion first with the county, is how much of the services we're getting from the county are coming from local property taxes versus federal and other sources.
There is I believe there's a pie chart online,
Okay.
and the person was wrong. It's not 10%.
Okay.
It's more like 6 to 7%.
Okay.
But there is a pie chart online that I saw.
Where the county-
Where do your property taxes go?
Okay.
Mental
Okay.
health, county board of, all that stuff. So, let's take a look at that, and we can have a discussion with our supervisor that says, we want to make sure when you're budgeting that you are adequately funding the services that are needed here. Why should we let them take so much of our property tax without us having a say in how that property tax is being used?
I think it would be great to have whoever's at the county level, provides health services and mental health services, invite them down. Let's ask them, what do you provide? How does that show up here in Half Moon Bay? And ask them, where are the gaps, where are the things that, maybe they want to fund more, or if they feel they can't handle it locally, help fund. I don't know what it is, but have them here so we can ask them, get some real detail around that, right? And get a feel for it.
That's a good idea. You know, and then one ask would be, show us where you're spending the mental health dollar in Half Moon Bay and the coast side. Who's getting that money? What type of services are getting funded? And then we can identify the gaps. You know, I'm guessing that mental health issues are only going to intensify given what's, you know, going on in the world. The other thing I wanted to say is, you know, a huge chunk of our population, I think it's over a third, is over 65 and over. So senior services are super important. And that runs the gamut, you know, from food to housing support to dental. So we want to make sure that we're, I think, covering those costs. It's a big chunk of our community. They, you know, they need to be, their needs need to be addressed in this program, I think. And I'm guessing we're going to hear from Alcove. I don't know if they're going to go through Coast Pride or whether they're, they're not here tonight. I don't know what they're intending, but they made a presentation. I got the impression that there was an ask there. I don't know, but.
I don't know, I'm not aware of.
To date, we haven't been approached for funding, but you know, I think it's safe to assume that any nonprofit is going to be looking for support at some point.
So there's a lot of need, but if in fact we can get those needs funded by the county, you know, who should be actually soliciting our input on that, let's do that, and that frees up a little bit more money for, you know, the other programs that aren't so much funded by the county. So, yeah. So I think you have adequate direction there on that item.
Yeah, what I'm hearing, just I want to make sure we're clear, is a consensus. Well, I actually haven't heard a consensus, so maybe we want to clarify that. But we heard a recommendation and no opposition to continuing the approach we've been using, which is the 9 service agencies that are providing these safety net services for a 2-year cycle. We'll continue to work with the subcommittee, and we'll do some additional analysis on needs and what services are being provided by the county, and ensuring that before we're supplementing services that the county's really, we're getting that return on tax dollars locally, that if we're giving X number of dollars from our taxes for mental health services as an example, that's being returned back to the community at that level or higher. And if not, that's where we should be advocating before we're funding supplemental services.
You know, our taxpayers shouldn't have to pay twice for mental health services. They should get what they need, but the right agency should be paying for it. And we should know what they need, and we should, you know, collaborate with the other agency to deliver those services. So.
And I'm sure that the service providers would welcome that advocacy on behalf of them and the community from the county.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I think we have clear direction as long as, that's. Yeah, great.
Okay, so we're going to take a 5-minute break. Reminds me of Marx Brothers. Welcome back. The next item is we're going to discuss our homeless services update and consideration of an ordinance to address encampment on public property.
That's correct. Hi, everyone, again. Julissa Acosta, Community Services Analyst. I am here to present to you a homeless services update, particularly within the city of Half Moon Bay. I know the last time we did this is a couple years ago. We continue to address homeless encampments on public property and provide services and resources, but it was time for an update as many things have changed over the last couple years, or additional support has come over the last couple years. But before I do that, I wanted to just highlight some of the challenges that our on-house community face and present to you some of the contributing factors to homelessness. While this is a very simple list, is not all the causes, but definitely what we've heard is housing affordability or access to housing, mental and health issues, substance abuse, economic instability or access to income or stable jobs, and when somebody's unhoused, access to shelter, or oftentimes shelters are at capacity and making it very difficult for folks who need stable shelter to get into support services. Luckily for the city, we partner with many organizations, including several county agencies. We particularly work closely with the Center of Homelessness from the county. We receive support services too from Behavioral Health and Recovery Services, which is BHRS, also the county clinic, and I want to highlight that the county funds directly organizations like Pacifica Resource Center to conduct outreach and resource connection to folks on the coast. And you've heard from Anita Reese in the past and at different council meetings presenting updates to you on the coast. We also partner, the county partners with Coast I Hope. They oversee the coordinated entry system, which is when somebody who is unhoused is seeking services and is willing to look for shelter and additional resources. They have to go through a process of enrolling and updating their information so the county can then in turn process service when available. And as a local nonprofit agency, we also partner with Abundant Grace, who, like you've seen in the previous presentation, they receive folks who need access to food, showers, temporary shelter, who are looking for support services in terms of job placement, and they also provide job information. So these are just some of the partnerships that we have. I want to give you a general overview of what the services look like when somebody is unhoused. Obviously, like you've heard in the past, and you'll see throughout the presentation tonight, a lot of the efforts that we conduct around homelessness are outreach. It takes a long time to establish trusting relationships with those who are unhoused. And heads off to the case managers and the outreach teams that go out into the encampments and try to engage with folks, especially when dealing with different circumstances like mental health cases. Oftentimes, folks who are unhoused also receive access to housing vouchers or temporary placements. We also try to make sure that folks have access to health care, oftentimes because living in unsheltered conditions leads to health deteriorating. Folks need access to medical care. Employment services when folks are ready to transition out of homelessness into more stable conditions that will require them to maintain and secure a job. Obviously, substance and mental health counseling, and education and training when appropriate too. Oftentimes, organizations that we partner with provide additional training and certificates to folks who are living in shelters. There's a very successful case, and I often see the person who graduated from one of the local academies at the local shelter, and he's now transitioned into permanent housing, has a stable job, and so some of those resources are available, especially as folks navigate this period. I wanted to highlight, before I jump into the Encampment Resolution Fund, just for additional context for council members that were in here a couple years ago, in 2021, the county purchased the Coastside Inn, and turn it into a homeless shelter. That is known as a coast house. During that time, that was before my time, but I understand there was heavy community outreach and engagement. There was a committee established to help navigate some of the communication between city, county, and the community, just to help folks understand a little bit more and then provide feedback when appropriate. And so the Coast House has been operating since 2021. It's a county program, and they secured the property management. It used to be Life Moves. A couple years ago, it transitioned over to Project We Hope, and they are the ones that take care of the property and clients. Right now, they have 24/7 security. They have access to training, access to additional support services, connections to DMV for folks who are needing to reestablish identification forms. They have transportation services, meals on site. I checked in with the staff and it's not included in the staff report because it took a little bit to get that information, but I wanted to let you know, right now at Coast House, we have 54 adults. Some of them are couples and 10 children. So it's just an additional piece of information for council. Throughout the time that we've had access to Coast House, many folks have transitioned. I do want to point out that the approximate length of stay for folks at Coast House is, the recommended is 120 days, just to go over the services and try to connect folks to resources. However, that can be extended if employment or housing is pending. So if somebody's on a path to permanent housing or employment, and they've reached the 120-day capacity, staff from Project We Hope will work directly on a case-by-case with the individual or individuals and grant an extension if, again, housing or employment is pending. So when folks are on their path to recovery out of homelessness. I now want to jump into some of the additional services that have come to the city from other entities. In 2024, the Department of Housing and Community Development created an opportunity for funding for different county agencies and city agencies as well to address homeless encampments that were in the public right-of-way. The county applied for this funding and included the city of Half Moon Bay and other areas on the coast, but I want to just point out some of the areas that receive additional resources from this particular funding in the coast. The map is kind of small, but you can see some of the areas are behind Safeway, under the Highway 1 and 92 underpass, the area behind the post office, train depot in Higgins Canyon area, and the Wave Crest near Smithfield Road. And I want to point out that last year, we particularly worked with different organizations, including Pacifica Resource Center and Abundant Grace, to coordinate cleanups. Pacifica Resource Center focuses specifically on outreach and services. Abundant Grace will help us, once the encampment is closed off, they can help, we coordinate with them so they can do the cleanup. And because of the additional funding the county secured from the ERF, we were able to move the folks that were on Wavecrest Road. There were several RVs parked there. There was also a fire lane access issue, and so folks from PRC connected with the individuals that were there. A lot of them transitioned into different situations, but we were able to remove all the RVs from there. Throughout 2025, we conducted approximately 8 encampment cleanups throughout different areas in town, mostly the post office, some areas near Main Street, and the Pillar Cedars Creek, which is it's a very common area for our unhoused populations to habitate. And additional to that, we removed RVs from 3 different locations. One was Wavecrest, like I mentioned earlier, some on the south end of Main Street, and then some in Seymour. So again, this is not possible without the collaboration of many key partners. The first one is Pacifica Resource Center to provide outreach. Then we coordinate with different departments. Sometimes it includes myself and other staff from Public Works or Community Development for code enforcement. And when appropriate and when needed, we coordinate with the Sheriff's Department as well to address some of these concerns. As you can imagine, some of these issues brought to us are focused on health and safety conditions, not just for the folks who live in different encampments, but for the environment and sensitive habitat areas. So it's something that we're trying to balance when we address the homeless encampments. The next thing I want to present to you, well, I talked about the encampments, but this is just as a general overview. We collected over 10,000 pounds of trash last year. And again, it was multiple partners at the table to make sure that this happened. I want to pivot a little bit more now and talk to you about the Hopeful Horizons ordinance that was adopted by the county last year. And this is just the second part of the staff report. The county adopted this ordinance to address, again, homeless encampments in public areas. The goal of this is to, again, aim or work towards the functional zero, which is we're having more folks transition into permanent housing that we're having into going into homelessness. And this is another program that requires heavy collaboration between different partners. The way the program or the ordinance is structured is if somebody is unhoused, and there are resources available, they are required to accept the resources. And if they choose not to, within a 48-hour period, they receive a series of notices. And by the 72nd hour, if they decline services, they can be cited or charged criminally. And so this is something that we're presenting to you for your consideration. The only others, there's 2 cities within the county that have adopted an ordinance. Well, Redwood City adopted this ordinance pretty much in its entirety last fall, and they're working towards implementation. And City of Millbrae implemented their own ordinance. So it's slightly different from this, and they address other areas such as private property. But just wanted to bring you up to date on who else has decided to adopt a similar ordinance to address homeless encampments. So the objective, again, is to preserve the health and welfare of individuals and mitigate the risk of homelessness. The premise is obviously it's unlawful to camp, and shelter, again, must be available to individuals and offered at the time of an encampment closure. The process is, as you can see here, the step 1 is we notified the individuals that their encampment will be closed within 72 hours. Obviously offer shelter at the time. This requires prior coordination with the county and the Center of Homelessness to ensure that there's shelter availability. And then if folks decline at that time, then 24 hours later, we come back with a second written notice. And if by the third time by second time they decline, we come back a third time. That's a 72-hour mark, and that's when we do enforcement. Enforcement in this context is provided by the county, retired law enforcement officers, most likely, handle that portion, but coordination of resources and encampment closures and cleanups is still part of our responsibility if we were to adopt this ordinance. So I know I'm giving you a lot of information, and there'll be more time for questions. I just want to go over the last couple of details. We are required to store personal property for 90 days. That is just whether the ordinance is in place or not. That's just a requirement. In the context of this ordinance, there's also folks who are part of the encampment will be required to participate in a diversion program. And there are other exigent circumstances where we can push for a faster timeline, meaning a 24-hour notice, and that's when there's a higher risk of safety or health at risk. So that's the general overview of the county Hopeful Horizons ordinance to address encampments on public property. I wanted to also, at the same time, because this was a new item to discuss for council, we did preliminary community engagement just to see where folks landed with this idea of a potential new ordinance. And depending on council direction, if you decide to move forward with this, we'll definitely do heavier outreach and community engagement and more focus groups or study groups. But I wanted to let council know, we met with several of the nonprofits that provide services to our unhoused on the coast. We met with the Homeless Advisory Committee, which was an advisory group from the Coast House Shelter. We also created an online survey where folks can just submit their answer. And there was 4 simple questions just to try to gauge interest from the community. We also went to different downtown association meetings to, again, just try to get a feeling of where they were in terms of a homeless ordinance, and checked in with property owners as well. We received over 100 responses all together, combined with the different groups that came to us. But I wanted to share the highlights of the feedback we received. The number one thing was housing affordability, more training for outreach teams and for sheriffs should an ordinance be adopted, definitely more training for law enforcement. Another thing was conduct heavy outreach and try to engage with folks more frequently. Provide more access to supportive services, and create pathways for midterm and long-term housing, not so much short-term opportunities. Sometimes what we heard from the community and some of the nonprofits, that tends to fade away and or ran out faster, and there are many mid to long-term housing options for folks. Additionally, some of the feedback we received from some folks is exploration of a safe parking program, which we tried a couple years ago, to have clear metrics from all standpoints, whether it's city providing services or nonprofits providing services, how many folks are transitioning out of homelessness and to what types of services, and make sure that there's shelter availability if we're going to explore an ordinance. I would say this is just the general themes that came to the top. Obviously, there were some additional comments, but these are the general feelings that came to the top after the little engagement that with the community. So this is the gist of my presentation. This is the gist of the feedback that we received. I'm happy to take more questions. I'm sure there are going to be a lot more questions from council for either of the 2 parts of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Julissa. Very comprehensive report. How do you want to begin? Do you have questions about the current process? Do you have questions about the ordinance? Okay, why don't you?
What's the current?
Okay, go for it.
Well, can you put back 2 slides ago where you're talking about enforcement?
Oh, here. This is for the county's ordinance? Yes. Yeah. Is that it? Is that the one you're seeing?
PCT will have it up in just a moment. It has to connect there first. There you go.
Yeah, I just had 2 quick questions. Shelter must be available. What is the availability of shelters?
That's a very good question. That varies. It fluctuates. Obviously, the Coast House is oftentimes at capacity. There are many times where we have rooms available at Coast House. We have the Navigation Center in Westwood City and other different centers throughout the county that have more accessibility. However, the challenge is, particularly with the folks on the coast, is that they don't want to leave the coast.
No, I understand that, but are there shelter beds available for those people that agree to take those beds?
That's the condition so before we move forward with the first notice, we have to ensure that there's a shelter available. If shelter is not available, we have to postpone our process.
Okay. And then the other one was written warning notice. What if somebody doesn't read?
That's a good question. We haven't encountered that. I'm assuming there will be a verbal. I don't know, Denise, if you're aware of anything, maybe not.
I'm not aware specifically of how the county would handle it if there's somebody that doesn't read, but I think the requirement is that they be given the written warning, and then hopefully there is somebody there that can help or assist in reading the notice to the person.
Okay, that's good. Those are my clarifying questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Nagengast.
So what do we do now? And what is this different? And almost like, and maybe this is how you have to do it. There's like a penal clause here. But, and when I read the report, everybody's trying hard not to do that, and it doesn't sound like anybody's been
Correct.
issued citations yet.
So far, when we met with the county and city of Redwood City, who have essentially the same ordinance, nobody had been charged because of the engagement that has been done previously, and folks tend to accept the help before it gets to that third notice where somebody will get charged or cited. Our process is somewhat similar to this, except we don't have the enforcement component. If we are notified of an encampment, we first visit, city staff will first visit to assess the situation, determine. We then connect with Pacifica Resource Center so they can conduct outreach, and then we follow up with them. Once the individual or individuals have moved, if they choose to move, then we conduct cleaning in partnership with Abundant Grace. But then that, obviously, we follow the process. We have to post a 72-hour notice. We store property when it's necessary. If folks take their belongings, that's, we don't store anything. But if there are items that we need to store, we do that, and then after 90 days, they get disposed. So our process is similar, with the exception that we don't have an enforcement officer that will come in and cite. We still try to coordinate with shelter availability, but again, our process doesn't dictate that in order to clear out an encampment, we must ensure that there's shelter availability, right? Especially, I guess the lines are a little bit blurry right now with our process in comparison to the ordinance, because we have a little bit more flexibility in terms of moving forward with the outreach and enforcement if it's on public property. We continue to do heavy outreach. We continue to do monitoring, but it slightly varies, right? And in the case of the ordinance, it is very clear that we must follow that timeline when clearing out an encampment. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I'm absorbing it. And then another follow-up is, so what's considered public property versus private? Because you mentioned Safeway, we mentioned, I know 92-1, but there is a trail there, so I don't know if they kind of cross over.
Correct. So I mentioned the Safeway area, and I'll just go back to the map quickly. It should be up on your screens. It's the top left area marked in red. That is the area behind Safeway. So it's not necessarily the Safeway shopping center, but it's the area along the Pillar Cedars Creek behind Safeway. That is public. That is public. And so just to clarify, the encampment resolution funding is only for encampments in public right-of-way, so not addressing any private property. If somebody's dealing with an encampment in their property, this funding doesn't necessarily serve that encampment. We still connect with Pacifica Resource Center so they can provide services. However, this particular funding doesn't go to that.
Most of the properties indicated here are city-owned properties, including the area behind Safeway. The one exception would be the next one down where it crosses under the highway, and that's a combination of city-owned property and Caltrans right-of-way underneath the Highway 1 bridge.
Councilmember Johnson.
I don't think the mic's on.
On that note, where would you store the items once you've gone through that
We've
process?
typically stored them at the courtyard, depending on the amount of items. Oftentimes, items that can be considered as trash are disposed, but we are required to store personal identification documents, birth certificates, medication, things that appear of value, and we'll store them for 90 days. If the person doesn't come and claim them after 90 days, we dispose of them. And that is clearly noted in the notice that we post at the encampment. Before we clean up an encampment, we provide a 72-hour notice letting them know that if I mark today, 72 hours from today, we were going to come in and clean this area. My contact information is there. The contact information for the outreach team is there, should folks want to engage with resources. And we also include the date of when the items will be disposed of if we're not contacted by the owner.
So, I mean, I've seen some of the encampment stuff. I mean, they have lamps, there was a power washer, bicycles, random things that they think, that's of value, but they grab it from somewhere and they think that they're going to do something with it. Are we going to store that too?
We have in the past. It doesn't always come to that, but we sort of make a judgment call, but they're also required.
So typically, it's things that have apparent reasonable value. So a bicycle would definitely have a reasonably apparent value. A lamp may have value. It just depends on what condition it's in. Right. And then the city would store it accordingly, because these are people's possessions, and so the cities generally want to treat them as such. And if it does look like it is not hazardous, not obvious garbage, then it would be retained for that 90-day period.
Okay. And then, because I've been to most of these camps. I've actually gone all the way down into the rivers, and I've actually seen the damage that they've done. And I've seen a guy coming up, I haven't seen him personally, but a friend of mine went in there and he cleaned out a lot of that stuff. And it was last year, Decker, I think his name was, and he got approached by a guy with a gun. I mean, so it's kind of crazy in there. It's over by the Safeway side. And what they've done with the pallets, they've grabbed all the pallets and they've dragged them all and they built structures with the pallets. They use the cardboards for the beds, and they grabbed that from Safeway. So I'm looking at the cleanup now. Are we going to do, at some point, it's A, B, and C, and D, and then there'll be a cleanup. Now, do we have a plan in place for the cleanup at some point? Who's going to pay for that cleanup? And then if we go from private property to public, so then if we go to private, where I'm thinking the Safeway is private, or is that public? Upper left Safeway. Right where the trucks and the unloading docks.
That's all private property. Any of the paved area is private property.
Okay.
There. Yeah.
And then, so you go from public to private, and then you're saying we can only enforce, you follow me? You're going to say no here, then they're going to end up going there. Because if you go to Monitas property, it's the same thing there, and they've got structures built there. So no matter where you go, you have the structures that are being built in the creek beds, and they're using the pallets to cross over the creek. So once you go into one area, then they go to the other area. They have a whole trail system back in there.
That's correct. I want to point out that City of Millbrae addresses private property in the ordinance. And should that be the direction that council wants to move, then we would explore that with Denise. Again, to follow the appropriate rules that have been already placed. But this ordinance, the Whole for Horizons, doesn't address private property. But it's a possibility.
And then the other thing is when we get to that point of cleaning up, because they've done so much damage in that area, and I literally saw a toilet and a hot tub built over there. They built, and it's still there. If you go by the bridge, you'll see it. Who's going to remove that? That's going to take some labor. Public Works is going to have to go in there and chop up the hot tub that they built. The toilet's gone, by the way. But it's just like, now do we have to get a CDP to go do this? And we have to go through the form, because now we're in riparian habitat. When they were in the riparian, now we have to go in and clean in the riparian. So is that in the big picture also?
Sorry, I'm getting comments from folks as well. The cleanup is an important part of the process, and again, it depends on if it's public or private property. I'll give an example. In 2017, when I arrived to the city, we had a massive encampment issue behind Safeway, 80 people at one point living back there. And we spent 18 months doing all the work to work with the individuals back there, get services offered, get them into programs and services. And when we finally closed it, everybody had left. I don't want to say of their own accord, because they left because we said that they had to leave, but we didn't have to do any arrests or any force movements out. But once all those people left those encampments, we spent over $100,000 contracting with a specialist that came in because the impacts of that encampment were so severe. There was so much garbage, there was so much work to do, so many structures to be removed. On the smaller encampments, it's a combination. Abundant Grace, their coastal cleanup team, can be helpful in some of those situations. Our public works team can do certain work in certain situations, but there's union regulations that govern how much they can go in and do. And then sometimes, depending on the severity of the damage and the mess that's left behind, you have to go to a specialist, a third party. So the goal always is to prevent encampments from getting to that point where those massive expenditures come into play.
I've seen a lot of needles. I've seen a lot of things of drug paraphernalia in there. I've seen weapons in there. I've seen they're chopping trees down. They're just ruining that whole area. It's so sad. Up on the post office behind there, when I went back there a year ago, it was people were having raising chickens back in there, and they had a full-on camp. And I saw the city posting and saying you're not allowed to be here. I watched as you guys went through this process. I was on council, or wasn't on council, then I got on council, and I kept going back in there to go see. Now it's clean, and it's posted. It's safe. They were coming out, and the people going to the church where they were scared. And now, when you go from Burger King to the bridge, what a difference that has made. It's now feeling safer. I brought the mayor in there. I brought Rick Hernandez was in there, and it was like night and day. We're getting somewhere where you can actually feel safe on these passages and actually utilize these roadways. So I think this process that we're going through is great, but we have to go through, like you said, we have to find a place for these people. We have to go through the process. We have to store their products, their personal belongings, which I've seen can be crazy. And I know people personally, and I've gone and meet, and I know a lot of homeless people in this town. I can call them right now if you want me to. And this is their stuff, and their stuff can be pretty big. And if you take away something that's that personal to them, that's not a good thing. And then do we have the storage at the facility? I mean, honestly, we have enough for our tractor, but do we have for...
Well, again, we've been doing this. The ordinance isn't a drastic or dramatic change from what we've already been doing for the past several years. It's additional tools towards enforcement. To date, we've been okay. As the city attorney pointed out, the law requires us to make those determinations about what has value, what doesn't. Part of the reason we work so hard with our service providers and we are more patient, we don't just go in and shut things down, is when we work with the individuals that are unhoused and they move along. Again, I don't want to say willingly because they're being compelled to move along. But when you do that, often they will collect the items that are of value to them and they essentially abandon what's left behind. And it's much easier to make those determinations that you don't have to keep that and store it. So sometimes people get frustrated. It's like, I see an encampment and it should be gone tomorrow. We don't have the bandwidth, the financial wherewithal, any of those things to just go in and do those cleanups immediately. But when we kind of thread the needle working with the service providers and providing that time to work with people to get them into shelter, get them into a better situation, and have them move more willingly, that eliminates some of that back-end work that you're talking about.
I mean, under the bridge, when you go down the Main Street Bridge, there's a gentleman living down there. There's a couch down there. That's his couch. Are we going to store his couch?
Typically, things that are made of fabric and furniture, it gets so contaminated and soiled that we do not keep those types of things. It's not sanitary to save those types of things.
So what do you need tonight? It sounds like we need an ordinance. the advantage is it standardizes a lot of what we're already doing, like you said, and makes it a uniform process so everyone understands the expectations, whether it's service providers, whether it's folks who are on encampments or thinking about it. It standardizes roles and expectations of everyone. Sounds like we're able to benchmark Millbrae and Redwood City. I'm not sure about that public-private thing you're talking about, because then I'm also wondering if it's private property, should the private property owner pay for something? If we tell them, you know, that process I wasn't sure about, but it sounds like it gives the city a lot of advantages to have a process that it's codified, and it does standardize the approach and the expectations. And that's when you can start really fully assessing additional needs. You know, where do we need money? Does the county come in? Are there other organizations? Because the more you have a really solid, standardized process, the more you can get grants and people are willing to invest, because then you have metrics to show this works this way, et cetera. So is that about right? You need that in terms of direction or?
What we're looking for, part of the timing of this, of course, is we have priority setting coming up in a week and a half. And this is an item that's been discussed for a couple of years since the county presented it and wanted cities to consider it. And so we just wanted to make sure that you had this information, had a chance to have a discussion about it. We actually don't need any direction tonight. That could be reserved for discussion as part of priority setting, unless it's something that you want staff to move forward with. And then it's simply, do you want us to continue to explore and pursue this ordinance? Are there specific elements like the private property question and other things that Jaleesa has mentioned that you would want us to explore further? So this is just a discussion. There's no action to be taken tonight. It's just an opportunity to get some feedback and inform you before going into priority setting in a couple of weeks.
We do have one public speaker. Sid Young.
Thank you. This is kind of interesting to me because for a long time I volunteered at Glide Memorial in the city and worked with the homeless, they feed the homeless there 3 meals a day. And I volunteered in the children's program too. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm being, heartless. But sometimes you have to speak the truth too, and there's a lot of levels of people who are homeless, and there's seniors who really might become unhoused at any moment because of the way our current federal administration is treating seniors and cutting back on Medicare and Social Security and stuff. So, there are people that abuse drugs and alcohol, and there's also people that don't want to live in a temporary shelter or accept help, but there's people that need it. So part of the problem, I think, here, actually, I'll just say, I look on YouTube a lot, and the homeless problem goes from Seattle to San Diego. It's not a Half Moon Bay problem. And we're on the superhighway right here because there's Pilarcitos Creek and we're on Highway 1. So part of the thing is they tend to like to stay in creeks. And you'll see that down in San Jose. They stay in the creek bed around the Guadalupe Parkway. And it does, I remember Don Horsley saying, when you move them out from behind Safeway, and Matthew, you mentioned that problem, they'll go to a different part of the creek, and they did. And then later, they had to go and clean it up over there. So that's a problem. And some of the detritus that's left behind, that might be property that has been taken from people's yards. I hate to say it, nobody wants to say it, but people lose stuff at night, and gets dragged down into the creek because they collected it. And that's not nice to say, but that's where it goes sometimes. So, you know, I think it's nice to have this program that you're talking about. Grants Pass, Oregon, the Supreme Court passed that ruling. I think this might be part of it because in San Francisco, they started clearing all the encampments there. And they did give another thing with giving out vouchers for places before they cleared the encampments. So I think it would be nice to have the Millbrae ordinance for the the private right-of-way too. So you probably need to do something. And is that the beep for am I over time? I'm sorry, I was just gonna say that I did work for the last 3 times every 2 years on the homeless count. And this time I was lucky enough to work with a woman from the resource center in Pacifica, and we counted up there in, Princeton. So they do a really good job with the resource center. And I think the RV situation is getting a little bit better, even though I was afraid they were all gonna come down here from the city. Thanks.
Thank you. There are no other speaker slips here. Is there anyone online who would like to address this item? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council.
If I might, I do want to,
there we go.
do you want to say something? We can take, if you want to open public comment.
Oh, sure, yes, no, I want to hear from Ms. Reese.
So sorry. I just wanted to note that the intention of the Hopeful Horizon is to be compassionate in terms of how it's implemented, and the fact that most services were accepted before it had to get to enforcement is a testament to the additional resources and support that happens on the front end. So if you're going to move forward with something, at least this comes with the additional resources that you don't have now, right? And I would also just encourage that when you think of this issue, to think of it regionally. So really partnering with the other coastal areas like Pacifica and even through Pescadero, although Pescadero has some other challenges in terms of the homelessness there. But I think that it's really important, and I think that you'll get more support from the county if it is a regional approach rather than a citywide. That is the feedback that we often get from the county, is that if you're asking for just a city, they're less willing to support it than if you're doing it regionally or thinking in terms of how it impacts. I mean, Coast House is a perfect example, right? It started out as just Half Moon Bay, it expanded through the coast. It is part of the county's continuum of care, and for that reason, it has additional resources and support. So I would really encourage you as you go into your goal setting, and I'm telling the same thing to City Council in Pacifica, because I think that this is the way that we can really address homelessness, is by working together on approaches that, serve all of our purposes. We have very similar challenges with the Coastal Commission, and for that reason, I think it's great whenever we can try to partner on solutions, including, as I mentioned last time, the safe parking program. There could be ways that we can expand that to include more deliberately folks in Half Moon Bay. We already do to some extent, but and I think that could also lead to some additional resources from the county as well.
Thank you, Anita. That's very helpful. I agree. The regional approach, I think, is super important. And, people move up and down Highway 1, too. They go back and forth. So I believe working with Pacifica and South Coast is a really good idea. I do support having an ordinance. I totally support the idea of, working with service providers and having a compassionate approach. But the longer that people are in, say, the creek, for us, the creek is the big thing. The worse the damage is, the more expensive it is to fix that problem afterwards. So you don't want to drag out enforcement. 72 hours seems reasonable to me. On the other hand, when we're going to remove encampments, we need to fence off the creek. So we need to keep people from going back again and repeating the same problem and then having to do more expensive, extensive cleanup. So I'd like to know where our fence is along the creek. You know, where's that project? I think that's going to be an important piece of this.
And I'll just share, I think it was not the last planning commission meeting, but the one before, we finally got all of our permits for the fencing that will run from behind Safeway to the footbridge over by Burger King, which of course that is where that original encampment was and is a hotbed of activity, but we're going to need to replicate that into other parts of the city to protect the creek, as you pointed out. But that should be going out to bid in the next couple of months and up this summer. So it's a long time coming.
I liked Sid's comment about looking at Millbrae too. It seems to me that we have some residual issues on private property, and maybe it's not requiring them to clean it up, but maybe it's incentivizing them through penalties or whatever, you know, to not allow it to establish itself and to reach out and consult, you know, with the city on these things. Because I think in some places we need private property cooperation, and how do we do that?
Madam Mayor, if I may, just on that note, so it's important to let you know that Millbrae's ordinance was adopted after the Grants Pass decision. The speaker mentioned the Grants Pass versus Johnson et al. Case. That was a U.S. Supreme Court case that came down that basically said that enforcing no camping regulations is not a violation of the Constitution's 8th Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment. So that basically contradicted and undid the Martin versus Boise decision, which was a Ninth Circuit case that found that criminalization of homeless encampments is a violation of the 8th Amendment. So that opened up the door to cities to continue regulating homeless encampments, and that's why there has been an increase in regulation by cities. So important to note that the county's ordinance was adopted before Grants Pass decision, and Millbrae's was adopted after Grants Pass. So that's why there is a distinct difference in the way they approach the regulations. I also wanted to say that most jurisdictions regulate private property through just their code enforcement regulations, so property nuisance provisions in their municipal code. That is what they look to enforce for these types of homeless encampment ordinances, asking the private property owners to make sure that their properties are maintained in a manner that's not considered a nuisance to the city.
That's very helpful, thank you.
And that is our current practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you know, the county's ordinance doesn't address things like environmentally sensitive habitat, which we're required to protect under our local coastal program land use plan. It doesn't address the fact that there are, you know, water quality prohibitions about, you know, disposing of soil or anything else, basically in waters that are subject to the State Water Resources Control Board regulations and the Clean Water Act, things like that. So the encampments, like in these areas, are violating the law, many laws. And that's something people in the community can't do, and we shouldn't allow it to happen, you know, for certain specified populations. Otherwise, why have any rules at all?
Madam Mayor, if I may add, the City of Redwood City, when they adopted the ordinance, they added some language specifically related to waterways in close proximity to schools. So it's something that we can explore with our attorney should we decide to move forward in this direction. So just
thank you. That would be helpful. Yeah, so I guess I'm saying I'm in favor of an ordinance, in favor of looking at amendments that address more localized conditions. And I do agree that, you know, continuing close relationships with resource providers, looking at these problems regionally, you know, this is a big issue. And homelessness is a big issue. I believe it's going to become more of an issue and we want to create an environment where we can look at these problems broadly and work with a lot of different parties to solve, because we can't do it ourselves. But, you know, we do need to address. I wish we could have a safe parking program.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of resistance to that, but it seems to me that, yeah. Oh, well. Vice Mayor.
Fencing and a safe parking program, both of those. I said, safe parking program and fencing along Purisima Creek.
Okay, I think probably.
Yeah, so I think this is something that could be discussed further, a little more direction when we get to priority setting. I do want to share, just because this was one of the biggest issues that came to me when I first started with the city 9 years ago. And it's pretty incredible how far things have come. In the last 9 years, our service provider resources have grown significantly. Abundant Grace was a very fledgling program, and now they have this incredible workforce center that was supported by the city, and great programs that continue to be supported by the city, and they do great work. PRC was not available previously, and they've been such an incredible addition to the work that goes on here and doing outreach and serving the community. And the Coast House, I think, has had a significant impact. People maybe forget that in 2017, 2018, again, there were 80 people living behind Safeway. The parking lot behind Safeway, you couldn't even drive a car through it. There was so much going on back there. And the areas around CVS and Round Table Pizza, I mean, there was a lot more happening. And I think through this work, and it's not that we've somehow eliminated a problem, but resources have been made available that have changed people's lives. And really what we're dealing with now is people that just have much more significant challenges. And unfortunately, we're finding more of them living in these sensitive areas because they're off the beaten path, they're a little less obvious to people. And I do think it's important to point out that as we continue to address this and protect the creeks more, it may become a more visible problem again. And it doesn't mean that there's more of it, it's just kind of being brought out of the shadows. And that will probably require some additional support from the community and additional resources. But I just want to acknowledge how far we've come in the last 9 years, because it is actually very, very significant. But until all these people are housed and sheltered, there's just more work to do. So.
Yeah, you know, we have lots and lots and lots of state park land that I think could be, portions of different ones might be used and managed for safe, clean, as we say, dignified living arrangements. You know, government agencies can get concession agreements with state parks to do a lot of different things. And I don't know, it's something that's probably people don't want to talk about, you know, our pristine state parks, but there's a lot of land there, a lot of public land there. It seems to me that that's something that's been, you know, untapped, at least looked at. You know, is there a way, you know, if we're all about access to our natural lands, if there's a population that has to or wants to camp, you know, how do we somehow accommodate that in the facilities that we have? Maybe even attract additional investment that can remedy some of the, you know, $1 billion of state parks deferred maintenance. You know, just thinking out of the box here, but. Sorry. Okay, so now the next discussion is about Senate Bill 707 and amendments to the Brown Act meeting requirements relating to new laws that change how we conduct our meetings and receive public participation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Denise Bazzano, Interim City Attorney, and I'm joined this evening by City Clerk Maggie Rodriguez. And we're going to be speaking to you tonight, as you mentioned, on the Brown Act and changes to the Brown Act through the bill SB 707, Senate Bill SB 707. So just for background, for some of the people in the audience that may not know, the Brown Act was enacted in 1953 and governs how local public agencies conduct their meetings. It ensures that those meetings are conducted in a transparent and open manner. But since the Brown Act was enacted, it hasn't really been updated significantly to address and modernize the way the public and officials participate in the meeting. So, comes into fruition Senate Bill 707. It was signed into law on October 3rd, 2025. Senator Maria Elena Durazo authored the bill to help ensure that working families and unrepresented communities that have faced barriers to participating in local government are not shut out of the civic engagement that they wish to participate in. SB 707 was sponsored by the Student Senate for California Community Colleges and supported by a broad coalition, including the California State Association of Counties, Urban Counties of California, Rural County Representatives of California, HOPE, Latinas, and numerous community organizations. Portions of the bill take effect, they took effect on January 1st. But a majority of the provisions relating to eligible subsidiary bodies, and we're going to, eligible legislative bodies, sorry, we're going to talk about those in a bit, take effect on July 1st, 2026. The bill sunsets January 1st, 2030, and as I mentioned, it's aimed at improving public access. So SB 707 makes significant revisions to the Brown Act in three major ways. First, it requires eligible legislative bodies to allow members of the public to participate remotely. Eligible legislative bodies is a new definition introduced through SB 707, and it specifies that eligible legislative bodies are either a city council or a city with a city with a population of 30,000 or more, a county board of supervisors of a county or city and county with a population of 30,000 or more, a city council of a city located in a county with a population of 600,000 or more, or a board of directors of a special district, and that special district has to meet certain requirements. So the city of Half Moon Bay falls into this definition because it is a city council of a city located in a county with a population of 600,000 or more. So when we're talking about eligible legislative bodies, we're only talking about the city council for the city of Half Moon Bay. So it allows members of the public to participate remotely for city council meetings. The second way that the major revision to the Brown Act is it changes the way officials can participate in a meeting remotely from an undisclosed location. So previously, when COVID-19 came, the state legislature provided methods for officials to participate remotely in meetings from an undisclosed location. That's different from the traditional teleconferencing under the Brown Act, where you have a location that's identified in the agenda. Somebody can come to that location and participate remotely. These new requirements still allow officials to participate from an undisclosed location, but it changes the requirements for that type of participation, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. The third significant revision is it creates a new category for eligible subsidiary bodies. These are advisory bodies that can participate in a meeting remotely, and the whole body gets to participate remotely if they meet certain circumstances and if the council allows and authorizes that body to meet in that manner. So for eligible legislative bodies, and again, this is the city council, and SB 707 opens up remote participation for the public. And it requires remote participation occur in two different ways. The council gets to decide which way it wants to go, but it's either a two-way audio-visual platform, which means an online platform that provides participants with the ability to participate remotely via both an internet connection, video conference connection, and a two-way telephonic service. So this is like a Zoom meeting. That's what two-way audio-visual platform is. Or a two-way telephonic service. This means a telephone that's set up that allows people to call in and participants to dial the telephone in and listen and verbally participate in the meeting. There are a number of requirements for eligible legislative bodies. Again, this is the City Council. So if the City Council decides to use a two-way audio-visual platform, so a Zoom, real-time captioning must be activated if that function is included in that two-way audio-visual platform. So with, say, for example, Zoom meetings, there is a method in the platform to allow that automatic real-time captioning to occur. So if we had that platform, we would enable that feature to allow the captioning function to be viewed by the members of the public. There's also a requirement that the city reasonably assist members of the public who wish to translate a public meeting or receive interpretation by another member of the public. The city already does that. We offer translation services, so I'm not too concerned about this requirement. The city must also adopt a policy regarding telephonic internet disruptions, and this is a policy that the council would have to adopt that provides procedures for recessing, reconvening if there's a disruption in the internet service or the telephone service, and specifies how the body is going to make reasonable efforts to restore the service. The policy must also indicate that the good faith efforts that the city is going to undertake will be done for at least an hour. And if the internet telephone service isn't restored within an hour, then the council can reconvene the meeting, but there may need to be special findings made to reconvene if the service is not restored. So again, trying to ensure that the public can participate in the meeting. And this is the way that the legislature thought it would be appropriate, is to have this disruption policy enabled. More requirements for the eligible legislative body. The agenda must be translated into all applicable languages, and that is defined. And so for Half Moon Bay, we do meet the requirements to translate the agenda into Spanish. It's only the agenda, it's not the agenda documents, so staff reports and resolutions wouldn't need to be translated, but the agenda does need to be translated. The city also is required to create and maintain an accessible internet webpage dedicated to public meetings. So we'd have to sort of beef up our website to give more information to the public about the meetings. We have to include an explanation of the procedures for how somebody can participate remotely, calendar of all public meeting dates with calendar listings, an agenda that's posted online, which is already something we comply with, and links to web pages and other information about attending the public meeting itself. Sorry. We also must make reasonable efforts to invite groups that do not traditionally participate in public meetings. So we have to conduct outreach to identify groups in the community that may not typically attend a meeting, to try to engage with them and encourage them to participate, come to a meeting, be involved in the city council affairs. Now we're going to talk about officials teleconferencing into meetings. So we're moving away from the city council meeting requirements and now talking about optional alternative teleconferencing for all legislative bodies. So these requirements for alternative teleconferencing would apply to the planning commissions and other subsidiary bodies, committees, commissions established by the council. Those are legislative bodies, and they can participate remotely if they can meet these requirements. They used to be called AB 2449 requirements, and that was the bill that established the just cause circumstances and emergency circumstances. Well, SB 707 does away with the emergency circumstances and morphs it all into just cause circumstances. It changes it a little bit, but it's basically all just cause now. These are a little bit different in terms of the requirements for participation in that. The teleconferencing official must use both audio and video. So a two-way telephone system isn't going to be sufficient. You have to have video capability so that the official can appear on video. If you're using the just cause circumstance, a quorum of the body must be in the location where the meeting is being conducted. And the participation must be identified in the minutes, specifying that the official is participating remotely. Voting must be by roll call, and a quirky requirement, I don't know why it is included, but it continues to be included. It was in AB 2449. Before an action is taken by the official that is participating remotely, they have to announce anyone in the room over 18 years of age. So, yeah.
I just have to comment there, in another board that I sit on, it's always been, is there anyone in the room under 18 years of age?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, that's right. It should be, no, it's over 18 years of age.
So they're making the mistake, not you.
Yeah, because we don't want to know about a minor. What I think the intent is to identify adults in the room with you. Yeah. So, over 18. Thought I'd mistyped it. And I'll just say as well, there are limits to how often an official can use the just cause circumstances. So if the body meets twice per month, then the official can use the just cause circumstances 5 meetings per year. If the legislative body meets only once per month, then the official can use the just cause circumstances 2 meetings per year. So here are the just cause circumstances. They include caregiving, child care for designated family members, a contagious illness, that's the one that's most frequently used. You don't have to identify the specific medical condition, you just need to use these specific circumstances when you're reporting that you're going to be appearing remotely under the just cause circumstances. Physical or mental condition requiring teleconferencing. Travel on official government business. So only if you're traveling for city business, not personal business. In that circumstance, you could just use the traditional teleconferencing requirements under the Brown Act, but you'd have to identify your location on the agenda and it'd have to be accessible to the public. Physical or family medical emergency or military service obligations can also qualify under the just cause circumstances. So now we're going to talk about the third major change under the Brown Act, the teleconferencing for eligible subsidiary bodies. This is brand new, and it only applies to these advisory bodies. So an eligible subsidiary body has to be advisory only. It cannot take final action on legislation, regulations, contracts, license, permits, etc. It cannot have the primary subject matter jurisdiction over elections, budget, police oversight, privacy, restricting access to library materials, taxes, or related spending proposals. And to use this alternative teleconferencing option, a lot of the same requirements for teleconferencing under the just cause circumstances would apply. So the legislative body must make they have to be roll call votes, and there has to be somebody physically in the meeting location, a member of staff, in order for the meeting to go forward. Yes, so teleconferencing must also be used both audio and video. And as I mentioned earlier, the council authorizes these eligible subsidiary bodies to conduct these meetings in this manner. And if the council authorizes these eligible subsidiary bodies to conduct these meetings, the council needs to make certain findings to do that, and it has to be reauthorized every 6 months. So this isn't really an easy approach to allowing completely remote meetings, but it is an option that the legislature felt was appropriate. SB 707 makes a number of other changes to the Brown Act. It confirms that an official with a disability may participate remotely as a reasonable accommodation. So this was always an uncertainty with the Brown Act prior to SB 707, but the legislature has confirmed that a member with a disability may participate remotely if, as a reasonable accommodation under the applicable law. The member that is participating remotely must use audio-visual technology, so they have to be on camera, unless that disability-related condition requires audio only. Emergency teleconferencing, so there was previously a provision in the Brown Act that allowed emergency teleconferencing for members of a local agency, but only if that emergency was declared by the governor. SB 707 changed that to allow emergencies declared by the governor, but also local emergencies, which is really important because that's usually when the emergencies occur, they're local, not statewide. So that's just another way that the body can teleconference if there's an emergency. It extends the prohibition on officials communicating on a social media platform. So before, the Brown Act had a provision that prohibits members of the body communicating directly with each other on a social media platform. SB 707 removes the sunset date, so it's almost a permanent feature. SB 707 also revises the prohibitions on disruptions for teleconference meetings. And by disruptions here, we're talking about people that are engaging in behavior during a meeting that disrupt, disturb, or impede or render infeasible the orderly conduct of the meeting. So very specific occurrences where somebody is disrupting the meeting. The presiding officer can ask them to correct their behavior, to come back to order, and if they don't, then they can be removed. SB 707 clarifies that those disruption procedures apply to people participating remotely as well. SB 707 also requires distribution of copies of the Brown Act, so maybe you've all gotten your copy. The clerk has been diligent in distributing those. And it also requires a list of meeting locations be provided to all officials. Yes, okay. And next steps are going to be covered by City Clerk Maggie Rodriguez.
All right, so as Denise mentioned, a lot of these deadlines are for July 1st. So right now we are evaluating our staffing and technology needs and some necessary upgrades to comply with the public participation requirements for council meetings. Some of our equipment is outdated, and as we all know, our chamber is multi-use room, so we double as a pickleball court. So there are just certain things that will need to be upgraded to make sure that we're complying with all of these requirements. And then we're developing a plan for outreach to encourage the public participation in the meetings. We're going to focus on collaboration with our nonprofits and continue to increase that outreach, with, I think, senior co-siders, ALAS, Co-Side Hope, our local faith leaders, the school district, Abundant Grace, potentially Alcove once they get here, just really trying to get more people in the seats so that we can have as much participation as possible. And we're also open to any other council suggestions for increased participation. If you have an idea that we're missing or not seeing, please let us know. And then again, we will also be upgrading our web pages to make sure we're compliant there. And then we're going to continue to work on the disruption policy for connectivity issues. Internet is always iffy on the coast side, so we want to make sure that we really nail down a great policy there. And then we will look into further training for council and staff on any new procedures or requirements. Yeah.
And with that, we are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Council members, questions?
I know this is riveting stuff.
Well, it's really important stuff.
It is. It's all, I would say a majority of every day of my workday is taken up answering or reviewing or analyzing questions relating to the Brown Act.
Yeah, the county has one county council who pretty much spends most of his time on that stuff. So, yeah, very important. Well, I appreciate the presentation. It's daunting, I haven't wanted to know about it. So.
And I can still ask questions, right?
Yes, you can.
No, not right now, but I just meant if I have a question about a meeting.
Yeah, and we, like Maggie said, we'll be coming back with a disruption policy once that's prepared for the council's consideration. And then, there will be questions as after the effective date of July 1st, when we start to enact some of these regulations that affect your body.
And we say disruption policy, mostly a process for how to handle that, right? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
I would say, I don't think we should, as a small town, we should focus intensely on one set of community members, like nonprofits. I mean, we want as many people to participate as possible. We can reach all of our community members fairly easily. So I think we just want to, double down on, communicating with everybody in town.
And maybe just to clarify, when Maggie was referring to the nonprofits, it's using them as a tool to get communication out to lots of people. But as you mentioned, we have great reach with our e-news and our social media, and Nextdoor, for better, for worse, is a great way to get the word out.
Yeah. So, nonprofits too, but, as many ways that we can make the touch on people is good. Yeah.
Also, most organizations and nonprofits, probably the easiest first thing to do, have their own newsletters, outreach, communications. So always having announcements of our meetings there, and then maybe once in a while, put a little article in why it's important to show up, et cetera.
It's certainly a good multiplier. Absolutely. We're going to find that we have questions as we go along, especially about remote participation and all that stuff. All right. So
I think we need to call for public comment on that item.
Oh, yes. Is there anyone in the room or online who would like to address SB 707 and recent changes to the Ralph M. Brown Act? Sure. Come on to the mic, though.
I came to the microphone several times tonight, but I am a public official, and I am a director for MWSD, and I usually never announce that because I'm not a bragger that, oh, I'm a director, blah, blah, blah. But every time I came tonight, I only said it the first time. If at future public meetings in July, after July 1st, will I have to say it every time I make a public comment, even if I've said it at the very beginning of the meeting? That's just a question. It's redundant.
Could you answer that question?
Sure, I can answer that question. Do you want to close public comment first, or do you want to just have me answer it now?
No, we can continue the comment, but I thought as long as she was there and
Sure.
the only one standing up.
So the Brown Act doesn't require you to disclose that you're making a statement as a private citizen. That is more a feature of the fact that you are not authorized, usually individuals are not authorized to make comments at a public meeting on behalf of the legislative body that they serve. So it's consistent with the Brown Act, but it's not necessarily a requirement of the Brown Act. It's just making a statement as an individual rather than on behalf of the body.
And that's important to do, I would just add, very important to do. Yeah, that's fine. Everybody knows who you are, Sid. Yeah. Yeah.
I think what I heard from our city attorney is that announcing it at all is not a legal requirement. It's more just a good practice, so.
It's a BMP. Okay. Is there anyone in the room who would like to address this item? Is there anyone online who would like to discuss this item? And you can raise your hand now and you will be unmuted. Seeing none, I will bring it back. And I think we can move on to item 12, which is commission and committee updates. Do we have any of those?
I'll just share, last week our Recreation Commission met, and they had a guest speaker, which was Dr. Miramontes from the school district, our superintendent, and he talked about the pool project and other ways that the city and the school district can collaborate, which has been a priority for the city and the Rec Commission specifically, because the school district has so many great facilities that we would love to provide more access to. So it was a great step in that direction. And then the commission talked about priorities for the coming year and tried to hone down kind of where they want to focus their energy in the coming year. So their next meeting is not until the end of this month. So we'll bring back a preview of that at a future meeting.
I'm wondering, are they and the Bike and Pedestrian Committee potential candidates for the eligible advisory bodies to meet remotely?
I'm sorry.
The Recreation Commission and BPAC, could they meet, do they fall under the subsidiary?
Oh, subsidiary body. Yeah, so I believe that we determined that potential bodies for the eligible subsidiary body category were the Parks and Rec, the Architectural Advisory Committee, and the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Yeah, those three.
So will you be having discussions with them about this, or?
Well, it's a council decision, so we would probably first bring it to the council if there was interest to authorize those bodies to meet remotely.
Okay, so they would have to maybe initiate it and say, we'd like to do this,
Or the council could initiate it. You know.
Okay.
And I'm happy to go to those meetings and put an item on their agenda and discuss it with them too.
Yeah, that'd be nice, sure. Okay, that's good.
Speaking of the BPAC, they have a meeting on Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. in this building in the South Day Room and also on Zoom. And one of the main topics of discussion are a variety of things around e-bike and e-bike regulations. So we know that's a continuing topic of interest, so people should tune into that. And that, of course, will inform a future council item to discuss that even further.
Can people watch that meeting on Zoom?
They can, yep. The agenda is already posted, and the link is on for Zoom.
And that starts at 6?
6:30 p.m.
6:30 p.m.
Correct.
Very interesting. Thank you for reporting that out. Okay. Any future discussion of possible future agenda items? Okay, hearing none. Move on to city council reports. Does anyone have anything to report out from meetings attended, other boards they sit on? Okay, that's a no. I just want to say really like what we're doing with the sign on Highway 92. And I know there's some issues to be worked out around that, but I just want to thank Councilmember Patrick Johnson for spearheading the effort to draw attention to our lovely downtown, our charming downtown, our loving downtown.
I gotta say, the merchants are inspiring me because they're all digging it, and I sent a photo of it to Marianne Stark, who's having issues of getting people down south of town on Main Street. And when you can inspire somebody, that sign inspired her that we are trying to do the best that we can. And I like the fact that everybody, when I pool the picture of what I'm trying to conceive, I'm doing a vote of we like it or we don't like it. And, you know, it's a community thing. So I think it's not just me, it's everybody.